We will be covering chapter 14 today, which is the modes of material nature, the three modes of material nature, which is one of my favorite topics, and hopefully will become one of yours as well. So, as we always do, we will start the class with an invocation. We'll read from the first page of the Bhagavad Gita. So, I'll just open this up here and we'll do it all together. Okay, so you can chant along. Om Jnanam Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitanscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Now please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So, chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita. It's right here. Okay. The three modes of material nature. So, every time we mention this, that how the Bhagavad Gita speaks about five main topics, right? There's five themes of the Bhagavad Gita. And we've talked about quite a few of those themes. Anyone can say one of the themes of the Gita.
Bhagavan.
Bhagavan or Ishwar. The Gita talks
Prakriti.
about Prakriti or nature, very nice.
Kala or time.
Kala or time, very
Jiva.
nice.
Jiva.
The soul, Jiva, okay.
Karma.
And karma, action, very nice. So these are the five topics of the Gita. And this chapter is covering which of those five topics?
Prakriti.
Yes, Prakriti, material nature. So we're still continuing with that. Chapter 13, we were talking about material nature. And now in chapter 14 as well, we are talking about material nature. So one may say, well, why is Krishna talking about material things? We are, spiritual living entities. We're stuck in this material world. Um, our whole human condition and human problem is this world of matter and attachment to this world of matter. So, why is Krishna discussing this? Why is this important? Well, Krishna says in the Gita, Daivihesha gunamayi mama maya duratya. So he says this material energy of mine is divine. Daivihesha gunamayi. It's composed of the gunas. Mama maya duratya. Mam evaye prapadyante mayam etang tarantite. And one can cross this ocean of maya. However, although we want to cross it, it is still divine. Daivihesha gunamai. This material nature of mine is divine, Krishna is saying. Why? Because it is Krishna's power. And if Krishna is divine, if Krishna is good, if Krishna is spiritual, then anything coming from Krishna must also be good, it must be divine, and it must be spiritual. And so, therefore, although we say that this is a material world, and indeed it is, in one sense, it is also spiritual because it is Krishna's power. And therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he's actually said how Spinoza was right, that actually there's only one element, there's only a spiritual element. Everything is ultimately spiritual. Even Western philosophers, some of them, are monists in that sense. Everything is spiritual because ultimately everything is coming from the Lord. And everything is meant to be used in the service of the Lord. But this spiritual energy, when accepted as something separate from Krishna, is called the material energy. So this spiritual energy, when it is, it actually cannot be separated. But when it is apparently separate from the Lord, when we use it in our own service rather than Krishna's service, then it becomes the material energy. So we'll get more into this. Now, if this is actually spiritual, then what makes it material? And that is being discussed here in this chapter. The three modes of material nature, the three gunas. This is what drives this world. This is what forms this world. All of material nature is composed of these three gunas. Maya is guna mayi. So this entire material world we see as Maya, and Maya is composed of the gunas. So there's nothing more fundamental to this world of matter than the gunas. So if we want to talk about the material world and understand what it is, then we have to talk about the gunas. So chapter 13 explained why the living entity, Purusha, is entangled in the external energy, Prakriti. So we talk about Kshetra and Kshetragya, the Purusha and Prakriti. So it was talking about why are we being entangled in this material world? Because of identifying with the Kshetra, with the field. But this chapter, chapter 14, explains how material energy binds the soul through the modes of nature. So how does that entanglement actually happen? That is being discussed in this chapter. So this chapter is actually the most, in some ways, the most practical chapter because it actually helps us understand how people become what they become, how these material situations develop. It's just a very instructive chapter. Krishna glorifies the knowledge he is about to speak by explaining that it will liberate the spirit soul. He then explains how the desirous living entity first comes into contact with material nature. So, Krishna starts out this chapter by telling Arjuna, as he does at the beginning of every chapter, that this knowledge is even better than what I've told you before. And what's very interesting is that this chapter is really not talking about devotional service directly. It's about the modes of nature, the gunas. So how could this knowledge be better? It is better because by understanding this knowledge, we can gain freedom from the material world and engage in Krishna's devotional service. So, it's again, it's to be taken seriously because Krishna is saying this. He's actually saying that through this knowledge we can really transcend the dualities of this material world. From the starting of chapter 2, Krishna is again and again telling Arjuna, rise above the dualities of material nature. So how do we actually do that? Krishna is telling us in this chapter. So here are the chapter sections. Um, the first section from section 5 to 9. Well, there's a section before this, sections 1 through 4, which I'll talk about. The binding of this pure soul by the three modes of material nature. How is the soul bound by the three modes? Then recognizing the supremacy of the mode within a person. So these modes of nature, the three gunas, they compete for supremacy within us. They're like, three forces within us that one is, pulling us down, the other is trying to pull us up, the other is trying to make us passionate. So they are they're always in flux. And how to recognize which mode is dominating. Krishna tells this. Actions and death within the modes. So what are the activities within each mode, and what is the result of dying in a particular mode of nature? And then transcending the modes. How do we transcend them? Most important part. We are learning about the modes so that we can transcend them. We are understanding the modes, the gunas, so that we can transcend them. I think all of you have wondered, why is it that this person is always so mean to me? Or why is this person such a funny person? Why are they so humorous? Why is this person just a naturally very loving person? So the gunas explain this phenomenon. The gunas give us answers to these questions. So what are these gunas? Prabhupada summarizes in one sentence. The living entities conditioned by material nature are of various types. One is happy in goodness, another is very active, passion, and another is helpless in ignorance. It's very pertinent that Prabhupada defines the gunas in this way. One is happy. Happiness is a sign of goodness. So why do the scriptures again and again tell us to move in the direction of goodness? It's not because they're imposing something on us. It's because goodness means happiness. The very nature of goodness is happiness. Just like some classes back, someone asked this question. They said, if bhakti is not done for happiness, then what is our motivation for doing bhakti? And if we want happiness, then isn't that an ulterior motive in the performance of our bhakti? But at that point, we talked about how, no, happiness and bhakti are not two separate things. They're one and the same thing. So the practice of bhakti naturally makes one happy. And so in that way, there's no division there. When we pursue bhakti, we're naturally pursuing happiness. And if we want happiness, that is synonymous with being a devotee, with being established in what we say Shuddha Sattva, or pure goodness, which is the platform of love. That's a transcendental platform. That's pure goodness. So therefore, one of the very dominant qualities of a devotee is that the devotee is always happy. And I notice this about my own mind, that when I start to have negative thoughts about someone, when I start to have negative feelings, then I become unhappy. And so therefore, that is a lack of Krishna consciousness, a lack of devotion. So happiness is the quality of goodness. As we will see more, Krishna goes into detail, illumination, happiness, and other qualities. Activity, being very active, which is glorified in the material world, is a mode of passion. A person in the mode of goodness is also active, but not active in the way that the passionate person is active for active sake. Like in this material world, we see that, like this one lady I was speaking to recently at my university, she said how she has three TVs in her home, three televisions, and they're all on all day long. And the reason is because she was saying, just frankly, it was part of a conversation. There's a few faculty together just talking, and she said that I always need something going on. That I always need something going on. So any room that I go in, I want the TV on because otherwise my mind bothers me. So the mind is so disturbed, imagine, that there always has to be something going on to divert it. Otherwise, we are not at peace with our mind. Just see. So being active is good, but the devotee is happy in, like we were reading last time, in solitude. Another is helplessness or ignorance. Now, we are helpless before the Lord. The devotee is always feeling very helpless before the Lord and takes shelter of the Lord. But too much helplessness in terms of you could say our position in the material world exhibits a lack of faith in the Lord. Because if we are always feeling helpless, that means we are taking shelter of the material world, and we are taking shelter of fallible human beings. The devotee does not feel helpless because he has the help of Krishna. She has the help of Krishna. The devotee does not always lament. Lamentation is a quality of helplessness because it's again a sign of. So even lamentation, uh, too much feeling of remorse, too much feeling of regret, of guilt. In one sense, these are good qualities because a devotee is very sensitive and it's very mild. But if there's too much of that, then it's a sign of ignorance because we are staying in the state of helplessness, of ignorance, rather than finding a spiritual solution. So a devotee is also not, so to say, um, a disturbance to the Lord. Disturbance in the sense the devotee does not want the Lord to fulfill all of his or her desires. Rather, the devotee wants to serve the Lord. You see, so the devotee is active because the devotee says, I have a great mission. The mission is to serve the Lord. And the non devotee is thinking, God should make me rich. God should make me happy. And that's the song that in India people are always singing. Sukha sampatti ghara ave. Going before the Lord and demanding, you give me this, my Lord. You give me this. Helplessness, but in the wrong sense. The devotee is helpless in the sense that they want the Lord's help to advance in spiritual life, but not help for material things. So these are the kind of the summary of the three modes of material nature. Now I mentioned to you how there's a first part, and in the first part, in the very first part, Krishna is glorifying this knowledge, and then in text 4, Krishna tells us how do we fall into this material world. What first of all binds us in these three gunas? The word guna itself is a Sanskrit word that means rope. Guna means rope. So we are actually literally bound by these gunas, by these three gunas, by these three ropes. So first question that comes up in a person's mind and that Krishna answers is, why are we in these gunas? Why are we in this material world? How does the soul come into the material world? Material nature is the mother, supplying the living entity with a physical body. So just like in our day-to-day existence, just like in our current life, we have a mother and we have a father. There's no way to have a child without both of them. So the mother supplies the body of the child. She actually gives the body of the child. Therefore, there's such a great debt because our very body is given by our mothers. So the body that we have is given by material nature, who is the original mother, Maya Devi, which is same as Durga. This is the material nature. She is the one supplying, because ultimately our mother is eating food which is making our body. So therefore, our mother is more like the via medium of our body, but the actual substance is material nature, the food, the earth from which we are born. And then we need a father. The father is the person who puts us in that body. So Krishna is the father of all, for he impregnates nature with the seed-like souls. Very simple and very scientific. Very nice, isn't it? We have a mother, we have a father. Material nature is our mother, and Krishna is our father. So this is a very famous verse, and possibly on your memorization list, maybe not, but it's a very famous one. Sarvayoneshu konteya murtaya sambhavantiya tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradapita. Aham bija pradapita. Even if we don't remember the entire verse, we should remember this one line. Aham bija pradapita. Aham bija. I, bija means seed, pradapita, am the seed giving father. Prada means to give. Very simple. I am the seed giving father. Aham bija pradapita. Literally, Krishna is saying, I give the seed, meaning the soul is part of me. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed giving father. So nice, isn't it? So this is just a comic showing the goodness, passion, and ignorance, which we are going to now look. So how does now in the next section Krishna will describe the qualities of those in goodness, passion, and ignorance, and how we can transcend them. So a person in the mode of goodness is conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge, right? They're not so much desire and hankering. Passion, they want fruitive results from their hard work. Ignorance is characterized by indolence and madness. And it all goes downhill from there. This is the hog that wants the stool of the man who's passing, as we see in India, in the villages. So these are the three gunas. So the mode of sattva is the mode of goodness. This is conditions one to happiness and knowledge. So for each of these gunas, Krishna describes what are the characteristics of those gunas, what are the symptoms, and what are the results. So the how it conditions us, what are the symptoms of a person in that mode, and what are the results of being in that mode. So it conditions one to happiness and knowledge. Its symptoms are correct perception and cleanliness inside and out. Literally illumination in all the body's gates. So Krishna says in the Gita that one in the mode of goodness, all the gates of his body are illumined with knowledge. What does this mean? I mean, why is he, obviously a person in the mode of goodness has knowledge, but all the gates of the body are illumined with knowledge. We have 9 gates in this body, the 2 eyes, the 2 nose, the mouth, and the 2 ears. So that's 6 and 7. Then the anus and genitals, that's 9. So all these gates are illumined by knowledge. What does that mean in terms of the mode of goodness?
Prabhuji, does it mean that we hear things that, keep us in the mode of goodness? We eat things that give us the sense of happiness, and we smell things that, give us this same thing, like whatever we eat and whatever activities we do, they are keeping us in that mode.
Yes, very nice. Uh, you can say it like this: whatever activities we do keep us in the mode of goodness, or rather, when we're in the mode of goodness, same thing but different way said. When we're in the mode of goodness, we know how we will use each of those gates for the mode of goodness. So when we're in the mode of goodness, it means that all the bodily gates are illumined with knowledge because they are used in the service of goodness. So like you gave such a nice example that when we're in the mode of goodness, our hearing capacity will not be used to hear cinema songs but to hear songs of Krishna. All the bodily gates are still there, they're still being used, but they're used in the service of the Lord. So this is the quality of a person in the mode of goodness: correct perception and cleanliness inside and out. Prabhupada says this in the purport, how a person in the mode of goodness is clean outside, and he says bathing 3 times a day, or at least 2 times a day. In this ignorance, so many people, they don't even bathe once a day, but at least twice a day. And then cleanliness inside means chanting the holy name of Krishna, performing our sadhana. This keeps us clean inside. The results are um, uh, uh, at death, one goes to the higher planets. So after death, one will move to the planets of the sages. And um, the actions in the mode of goodness lead to purity, lead to the purification of one's body. The next one is the mode of passion. In the material world, this is glorified. Follow your passion. Music, art, all these things, which are actually very nice. But when they're done without the connection with the Lord, when they're done outside of um, Krishna consciousness, then they are in the mode of passion. And Prabhupada here in the purport, he says a very shocking statement, a statement that you you could say it shows us that how spiritual life is actually so exalted. It's beyond even what we think is in the mode of goodness. He says the Raja stage of life gives a slight clue to the realization of the absolute truth. Even being in the mode of passion is such a great thing. It gives a slight clue to the realization of the absolute truth in the forms of fine sentiments in philosophy, art, and culture with moral and ethical principles. So we generally think, well, philosophers, they're in the mode of goodness. Those with very high culture, they're in the mode of goodness. But Prabhupada here is saying they're in the mode of passion. In the forms of fine sentiments in philosophy, art, and culture with moral and ethical principles. So the philosophers who are busy in their philosophy their whole life, they're actually busy in the mode of passion. Because goodness, again, is beyond material activity. Goodness is a stage of, of true knowledge, of spiritual knowledge. It's a stage of illumination. But philosophy is actually very broad. They talk about moral philosophy, they talk about the philosophy of art, social philosophy, philosophy of mind, or philosophy of body. These are all in the mode of passion. It doesn't matter if we think that we're being very intellectual. No. We can be very intellectual but be very passionate. Remember, buddhi is born of the mode of passion. Intelligence is born of the mode of passion. And the mind is born of the mode of goodness. So therefore, spiritual life is beyond mental gymnastics. It's beyond just a person who's smart. Smartness is not a qualification for spiritual life. Therefore, we find in the example of Lord Chaitanya. And as I was actually thinking of this last time after our discussion, which we really liked about intelligence and mind, that how when Lord Chaitanya, he was a great scholar in Navadvip, very, very great scholar. He was an erudite scholar. And all the other scholars would actually cross the road when Lord Chaitanya would walk down the road because they were afraid of being defeated by him. This is how scholarly he was. They didn't want to get into a debate with him because they knew they would get defeated. And then when Lord Chaitanya, when he meets his spiritual master, then his spiritual master, Ishwar Puri, he tells Lord Chaitanya, he says, "You are a great fool. Therefore, give up your study of Vedanta and just chant Hare Krishna and dance in ecstasy. That will purify you." And of course, this was a pastime. Lord Chaitanya is the most intelligent person. But Lord Chaitanya, when asked by these Vedantists, he would always say, "My spiritual master said, I'm a fool. And he's told me to chant the Mahamantra and dance in ecstasy." And he says, "Ever since I've done this, I'm unable to discuss Vedanta." So, of course, it's a way of saying, uh, but but the associates of Lord Chaitanya were not the most intimate devotees of Lord Chaitanya because of their philosophical knowledge. They were the closest devotees of Lord Chaitanya because of their spontaneous love for Krishna and their practice of bhakti, which begins with hearing and chanting about the Lord. So philosophy is very important. Don't get me wrong, but uh, higher than philosophy is the loving ecstasy of love for God, which Lord Chaitanya showed through his own example. In the material world, we tend to think philosophical higher, smarter, better, but in spiritual life, we cannot think in that way. In fact, there's a passage in the Ramayana which says that sometimes madness is confused with spirituality because spirituality is so similar to madness. So the devotee of the Lord is, like Lord Chaitanya showed, they are very attached to Krishna through love. So, what are the conditions of the mode of passion now? Hankering and attachment. A person in the mode of passion, their condition will be always hankering. Something's always wrong in life. If something's always wrong in life, that means nothing is wrong in life. That means our mode of passion is too strong because we are hankering. We're thinking, always uh, feeling in what's the word? Um, Dissatisfied or incomplete because we want material things. And attachment, too much attachment. We are always attached. We need to be attached, but too much attachment to something is not good. I was thinking about this recently that like I have two small children, and it's natural to be attached to them, and so I'm attached to them. And how much should I be attached to them? Um, if you don't spend enough time with them, then you feel it's very you could say very impersonal. So that's not good. That's not. But on the other hand, if we become too attached, then in our attachment and our love for our children, we can be only serving them and not serving. Like a devotee has to be paradukha dukhi, and the devotee has to help the suffering of others. So then we may become too self-absorbed. That is also a risk. So in the mode of goodness, there's also attachment, but in the mode of passion, there's too much attachment. Like I was speaking to a very senior devotee, and they were saying how some of the parents that they were seeing their children, I mean, it's just like they have to be part of everything, every sport, every competition, the spelling bee competition, the art competition, and all these things. So that is too much attachment, where there's no time left for Krishna, right? If I'm too attached, then I can also forget about the suffering of others. I can forget about, well, I have to help others also. I have to serve Krishna also. So we have to find that balance where we are uh, eager to serve the Lord by serving our family and making them into nice devotees, and also serve the Lord by doing the Lord's desire in general, also in terms of our responsibilities towards society, towards the Lord, towards the spiritual master. So, what are the symptoms of the mode of passion? Greed, accumulation, always undertaking new projects, uncontrollable desire. Very interesting, also. See, this is the consciousness of the Gita. The Gita is such an amazing book that it helps us not only in our spiritual life, but it also helps us in our material life. Like this one here, always undertaking new projects. Um, you read this in success books, like they say, seven secrets to success, all these things that they'll say that successful people, um, they don't spread themselves too thin. Rather, they become very good at what they do. So when we're always undertaking new projects, then we have so many anxieties because we have so many projects to take care of and we don't do any of them well. So this is not just Krishna's instructions, this is not just a spiritual point, but even materially speaking. If we become too ambitious, we take too many projects, and when we take too many projects, we actually become less successful. So even I've seen very good devotees like His Grace Bhurijan Prabhu. They have this quality that when they're doing something, then they really give themselves to it. And even if other opportunities come, they will say no to them because they are there's always enough time for whatever we want to do, because the only reason we don't have time is because we're doing something else. There's always time. Time is never the problem. The desire is the problem. Right? Where we want to spend the time, that is the decision. Um, so in your preaching also, when people say to you, "Oh, there's no time for spiritual life. There's no time," a nice response is, "There's always the same amount of time for everyone." And the time is not. Don't blame the time. Time is there, but our decision to use our time in that way, that is not there, right? So there's no time. There's time, but there's no desire to use your time there. Therefore, there's no time. So we will have time for spiritual life when we're not trying to be too multi-talented. We have to be satisfied with the talents that Krishna has given us and develop those. Like one time, I was trying to learn too many musical instruments. I was interested in music in my childhood, so I, so then I took this and I took this and I took this. I took, guitar and flute, and then I didn't learn any of them well. And then I gave them up, and then I focused on, a few. So this is very important. And then the results of being in the mode of passion. So after death, one is reborn amongst fruitive workers. So if we're very passionate, we will be born again in that same consciousness. And the action of the mode of passion leads to misery. Why does it lead to misery? Because when we're acting in the mode of passion, then it will lead to the results will ultimately a collapse. So therefore, it leads to misery. But when we're in the mode of goodness, then we are well situated. One way to avoid the mode of passion is to determine what are my duties at this time. What is my prescribed duty? So going back to the example of children, right? So when we have children, the fact is we have them. So then our primary duty becomes raising them and taking care of them in Krishna consciousness. So at that point, um, if we're situated in the mode of goodness, then we may say, okay, this is my duty to Krishna at this time. So I have to reduce my other material ambitions. So you'll see, at that time, maybe I have to work less, or I have to, pursue other passions less and let them grow up. And once they're a little older, then I can do other things. They're more self-sufficient. So, but in the mode of passion, we're trying to do everything. So then the children are unhappy. The work is not going well. So then it leads to misery. Then the mode of ignorance. This is the mode that we should completely avoid. The mode of ignorance. Uh, we all know about this. So conditions one to madness, indolence, and sleep. So mode of ignorance can actually go in two very opposite directions. It can go in the direction where there's just no activity, just sleep, just sleeping all the time. It's so intoxicated that one cannot do anything. Indolence and sleep. Intoxication is conditioned by ignorance. Sleep is conditioned by ignorance. But then we say, well, we all have to sleep. So Prabhupada actually defines this in the purport. What is sleep in the mode of ignorance? Who can say? Very interesting.
Sleeping more than a certain number of hours.
Yes, very nice. So when we sleep more than 6 hours a day, then Prabhupada says that is in the mode of ignorance. So everyone has to sleep, but sleeping more than 6 hours a day is in the mode of ignorance. Now, most of us on the call, we might be like, well, I sleep 7 hours and I need 7 hours in order to do my work. So that is true. In other words, um, we cannot artificially move from one mode to another, but rather we move from one mode to another as a result of purification. So by purification of our senses and our life, we will move from one mode to another, not simply um, by modifying the symptoms of that mode. That would be like, just like if I have, I'm getting regular headaches, then I go and I take a Tylenol. Well, the Tylenol will remove my headache, but the moment the Tylenol is gone, I'll get the headache again because I didn't solve the cause of the condition. So if we say, okay, sleeping more than 6 hours is in the mode of ignorance, so I'll just sleep less than 6 hours. Well, that's like taking a Tylenol. We'll do it for a few days, but we're not solving the cause of why I want to sleep more than 6 hours. And the cause of that is because of leading a very passionate life. When we're very much in the mode of passion, then we need to sleep more because we get so exhausted. Or when we are, in the mode of ignorance, then we have an attraction to sleeping more. But when life is in the mode of goodness, then there is more energy. There's more, you could say, satisfaction in life. There's more nourishment in one's food. One more, you could say, happiness. And so therefore, sleep 6 hours a day is no problem. We feel very happy. So sleep is one, then madness is another. Now madness can go in the opposite direction, where ignorance can also take the form of violence. So it's a lot of activity and so much thoughtless activity that it leads to the mode of madness. The symptoms of the mode of ignorance are moroseness, inactivity, madness, and illusion. So, as you mentioned, these are all the different qualities of the mode of ignorance. So we should practice avoiding these symptoms. And then the results of dying in the mode of ignorance is, reincarnating in the animal kingdom, becoming, going into the lower species of life. If we die in the mode of ignorance, that's the result. And the activities in the mode of ignorance, they lead to foolishness. Prabhupada says this, they lead to foolishness. So they are a result of foolishness, but then they lead further to more foolishness. So ignorance leads to more ignorance. And that's the unfortunate snare of this material world. And that's why we need the help of the devotee, and the devotee needs to help others. Because Prabhupada in one purport says that Krishna will allow the conditioned soul to hit rock bottom so that the conditioned soul, fully understands the futility of this material world. And then Krishna may show that soul the path forward. So foolishness can lead to more foolishness, and therefore we need to help the soul through knowledge. Simply through experience, we oftentimes cannot get to the truth until a very long detour. So we must do that. So, okay. So yeah, these are the verse numbers here that you find next to these points. These are the verse numbers. So after describing the three modes of material nature, then Krishna says that these modes are within us and they're always fighting for victory. And as adults, we do have this actually, this war going on in our minds. We can all recognize that sometimes we're thinking, should I go to the gym and work out, or should I sit home and, read Bhagavatam, or should I, sit down and just watch a movie? Like there's these different things that pull us at all these times. The modes of nature compete for supremacy within an individual. Although one may be in lower modes, he can choose to nourish the higher modes and thus assist their victory over the others. Thus, one can elevate his modes. So now the very interesting part. So these are the modes in terms of how they affect us, what we've discussed. But the fact is that everything in this material world is formed by these modes, which means that the modes are also around us, right? The modes are continuously surrounding us. So if we want to move ourselves from one mode to another mode, if we want to, you could say, be ourselves in the mode of goodness, then the easiest way to do that is to nourish ourselves with things around us that are in the mode of goodness. Right? So if we are around people, particularly that are in the mode of goodness, our own mode will be in the mode of goodness. We'll be drawn, we'll be elevated to that mode. If we associate with people in the mode of passion or ignorance, we will be driven in those directions. So then Krishna, therefore, describes in the next section, the final section, how to transcend these modes. Krishna says, Nanyam gunebhya kartaram yada drashtanupashyati gunebhyascha param veti madbhavam sodhi gachyati. When one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work than these three modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to all these modes, he attains my spiritual nature. So Krishna here is clearly saying when one properly sees that in all activities there's no other performer, that no other performer is at work than these three modes of material nature. So everything, there's nothing else, all activities, there's no other performer than these three modes of nature. And that he knows, and you also know the Supreme Lord, that person can transcend the spiritual, the modes, and attain to the spiritual nature. Now, Krishna here is saying that everything in this world are the gunas. Everything else in this world are the modes. So this means that the table and chair that I'm using right now are the modes of nature. This also means that the bar, the restaurant, they are also the modes of material nature. And therefore, anything that we select in this world, we should think, what mode of nature is this in? Because based on the mode of nature that it is in, I will be in that mode of nature. Also, in terms of what we've been discussing about people, we can also understand people now better as a result of this knowledge. Because the next time someone is really angry, you can understand that, okay, it's the mode of ignorance. This person is in the mode of ignorance, and this is what they're exhibiting. And because they're in the mode of ignorance, they're going to be like this. And they're in this mode of ignorance because of their lack of Krishna consciousness. Because if they're better devotees, if they're more Krishna conscious, they'll move from the mode of ignorance to the mode of goodness. The next time someone is, driving you crazy because they're continuously talking and just super passionate, okay, this person is in the mode of passion. In the same way, the next time you're going into the store or you're going to the university, we can think, okay, this university is a place of the mode of passion. There's all these, material conversations going on. And it truly is. I mean, it's all conversations about lust, anger, greed. It's just, that's the subject matter of the conversation. In terms of also people and relationships. I mean, people think schools and colleges are in the mode of goodness. They're not. They've done studies. Maybe 80% of students, they go to university to find a partner. This is the whole social life that accompanies the college and the school. That's the focus. So um, if I associate with this place, this store, or this university, like we were saying, then I will be affected by the mode of passion. And therefore, I may still have to go, but therefore, I need to be careful of that. I need to be aware of that. I know that that is the weakness in that situation. So therefore, I need to be conscious of that particular weakness. Now, when I go to the university, most likely the mode of ignorance won't be so much prominent, because I mean, maybe nowadays you don't know anything, but there won't be like um, you know people sleeping in the hallways. Sleep might not be the biggest issue there, but the mode of passion will be the biggest issue. If I'm going to preach and it's at nighttime, maybe an evening harinam, we have to be thinking, okay, the mode of ignorance is going to be very prominent, the very low modes. Like when we used to go in London harinam, when I was living in England, it was so blissful. There was at least 100 devotees there on harinam every week, Soho Street. But one thing that I noticed is that the atmosphere where you were doing it was so dangerous. Like you had the spiritual world and the material world right next to each other. So if you were with the devotees, you would feel, the spiritual world. You were on Harinam and on the holy name, and it was just giving the holy name to thousands of people on the Oxford Street, which is the central street of London. And we would go there, and there wouldn't be space to walk. It's so packed full, and we'd just be doing harinam and thousands of people taking pictures and videos, and these would end up on Facebook accounts across the world. There was some major newspaper that said that one of the 10 major things you have to see in London is Saturday night London harinam. It was that famous for some time at least, where it became part of the city, the city of London. There's thousands of things happening there, but Harinam became one of its like remarkable events. So it was a huge preaching event, and so the devotees would look forward to it for the entire week. But right next to where they were doing Harinam was the red light zone. All the clubs and the worst clubs in the world and the worst places in the world were there as well. So the devotee knows, okay, there it's not really the mode of passion, it's a mode of ignorance. It was evening time, Saturday night, Harinam is nighttime. There'll be, drugs and alcohol and prostitutes, maybe. But I'm going for Harinam, so I have to be very aware of the mode of ignorance and keep myself in the spiritual atmosphere. So, so the recognition of the modes allows us to recognize what's happening, and accordingly, it allows us to put up our guard, and therefore we'll be more effective in deflecting it. Okay, this is very dangerous, so therefore I have to be in the middle of the Harinam party. I have to be right in the middle, so that I don't lose the path, so that I don't get strayed away. I'm with devotees. When I'm at the university, I have to be very careful that I don't become conditioned by something that looks like spiritual life but is actually mundane philosophy. It's not as bad as the bars. It's still the mode of passion. It's good, but I might be conditioned by the mode of passion. So I have to be careful. Similarly, when we're in the mode of goodness also, we have to be careful that I might be conditioned. I might become overcome by the mode of goodness, of feeling holier than thou, by feeling I'm a peaceful person, and if Krishna asks me to fight, I won't fight. I'm a peaceful person, so therefore I'm better than everyone else. So if we recognize the mode of goodness, we'll be careful not to fall, not to, become prey to the mode of goodness. So all things in this world and all situations in this world are the combination of these gunas. So if they are the combination of these gunas, then the next question that we have is, what are these gunas? If these gunas formed all this whole material world, then are they like the atoms, the building blocks that make up this entire material world? But if they are, then what are they? I mean, like, are actually atoms gunas? Are the gunas the atoms? Or no, obviously this doesn't seem right. Maybe the gunas are like colors. They color everything in this material world. So like you see these blocks here, they're all made of the same plastic, but they're different colors. And many times the gunas are characterized in this way. I mean, the gunas is such a big topic, you can have a book on it, and there are books on it. They oftentimes say that the color, that characterize the mode of goodness is yellow, white, brightness, um, passion is red, and, ignorance is darkness, like that. And they've done studies on this actually, that, that's why the insurance cost for red cars is more than black or white cars, because people who buy red cars tend to be more passionate. And if they're more passionate, they're more likely to get into an accident. And we didn't say this, the insurance companies said this. It's proven fact statistically. And so therefore they charge them more. If you have a red car, you'll get charged more. So are they attributes or colors? And finally, are the gunas capacities? Krishna speaks about the gunas in terms of capacities. Also, here, let's go back here. Let's see, the capacity for here in the Bhagavatam, it's more talking about in terms of capacities, but the capacity for doing, a lot of things means that that person has a very strong nature of passion. So the Kshatriyas, they have the capacity of managing an entire state, something that might drive another person crazy. So that's because Rajoguna is very prominent in them. They have the capacity to do that. Those in the mode of goodness, they have the capacity to sit and read a book for 6 hours. Whereas someone else in the modes of passion and ignorance have a different guna. After 1 hour, they have to, take a break, do something else. So like this capacity also in the mode of ignorance, one has the capacity to sleep 12 hours. Whereas someone else may not even be able to do that great feat of sleeping 12 hours straight. I distinctly remember this. Someone told me, a student, I think, there's a conversation going on between two students, and the student said that I slept for 20 hours straight. I actually heard them say this. They told the time when they slept and they woke up. They said that I actually slept for 20 hours straight, and this was a full-grown man. So you have the capacity. So it's also in terms of capacities. So what do you think? What are the gunas? What exactly are they? We talk about gunas so much. Krishna's here saying everything is composed of the gunas, but what are the gunas? Maybe someone can suggest.
The state of the mind.
The state of the mind, that's a very good answer. So it's more like an attribute, a color. But in that case, Krishna is saying that even tables and chairs are gunas. So in that case, how do you explain tables and chairs? So
Prabhuji,
huh?
it's a nature
Mode of passion.
body has taken.
It's the nature that the body is taken, okay. But what is that nature? When we say nature, what does that mean?
According to our karmas.
Mode of passion. Prabhuji.
So motive passion is one of the gunas. But our question is, what are the gunas? So,
Energies of Lord.
energies of the Lord. Okay. There are
Prabhuji, gunas
energies.
are like,
Yes, go ahead.
Prabhuji, they are like the rope that binds us, like, the bull is bound by the rope to the nose, and then, it keeps working. So we are bound by this rope, which makes us do some work. It is based on our desire that we have.
Okay. So it's based on desire. It's like a rope. And then I think you gave the answer energies. I really like that answer.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Raj Prabhu, go ahead. Yeah.
I was thinking it is our vasanas from the soul has been like carrying from the past birth, and also the characteristics of the current, the actions of the current. How to say? I don't know how to explain, but what I think is, if maybe in the previous birth, if we are in the mode of goodness, we take birth in the same. We carry the vasanas along with our body, and
Asanas.
that maybe that helps us associate more towards mode of goodness. And if we are passionate in the previous birth, and it makes us to go in that way along with our activities what we associate with.
Yes. So very good. That's actually a very nice answer. The vasanas are also part of the gunas, which then determine or sort of form our next body, like you're saying. They then form our vasanas, form the next body. Now, again, when we speak about vasanas, it's a nice way to define it, very good. But again, sometimes we define things in terms of other things that need definitions, right? So then, to a layman, how do you define what a vasana is? What is a vasana?
It's like the imprints that's been. I don't know how to articulate it well, Prabhuji, but
Prabhuji,
it's like the imprints.
propensities of a person.
Okay, propensity. So it's like an imprint, and it's like a propensity on the mind. Okay, so it's more like a shape that's carved into something, right? So now we have the question, well, what is an imprint? What is a shape? So we talk about shapes and imprints, but what are they? So we see a triangle. Is this a concept? Is a thought? So are the gunas just thoughts? But they're not
I
just
think it.
thoughts.
Prabhuji, like
Sorry, Prabhuji. I think it's knowledge, Prabhuji.
Goodness can be also knowledge. So definitely the mode of goodness is characterized by knowledge. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, like it is said that whatever we think before dying, that's the nature we obtain in next birth. So suppose we are thinking of whatever we are thinking of, some movie or stuff like that, or so next birth we may be given birth according to our karma. So like we'll be born into ignorance, and whatever we do and whatever we are doing, our activities will be indirectly connected to ignorance. So that is indirectly connected to dukunas. I don't know, I'm right?
Yes,
So
that's a very excellent point. But again, ignorance is just one of the gunas. We're speaking of all three here. So we're trying to find, okay, a definition. Well, how do we characterize these gunas in such a way that we can understand uh, how all three gunas, what all three gunas are? But your points are completely correct. Yes.
Hare
Yes.
Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yes, go ahead.
Prabhu, gunas can be defined as forces, subtle forces.
Subtle forces. Okay, so kind of like energies or powers. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So I think Gunash, you just have sort of, have put these points right on the screen. They are sort of combination of, everything what you have on the screen. It's like, the blocks or, some impressions, attributes or colors, from the last lives, previous life, and obviously, capacity that we have in this a present body. So it's I think, based on all of this answer, everything is correct, but it's sort of combination of all these three. That's what I'm thinking.
Very nice. Yes, it has to be all three. We're coming to that conclusion as well. The gunas have to be all three of these things. So definitely that is the case, that the gunas are all three. And if they're all three, then again we need to understand, well, then what are they? What are the gunas that become all three of these things? Any other thoughts?
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
Yes, I think like it's a nature that we collect through like past life and this life that we develop by time.
Okay. Nature. Very nice. Very nice.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I feel gunas are a curtain between us, Jiva, and Krishna, which blocks us to see the clear picture. When we uplift ourselves above all these three, then the picture comes more clear.
Yes. So the guna, that would be an effect of the gunas, that they form a curtain. You're absolutely right. Maya Javani Kachanam. Like Queen Kunti says, these gunas actually form a curtain between us and Krishna. So
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. May I try?
Sure. Yes.
I think gunas are the level of consciousness where ignorance, that is tamasic guna, is the lowest level of consciousness, and the medium level of consciousness is the passion, and the higher level of consciousness is the sattva guna.
Yes, that is also true. Yes, absolutely. Our consciousness can be also in different gunas, but it gets colored. The consciousness itself is spiritual, but it gets colored by the gunas. So it's in that sense, gunas are more like colors. So,
Prabhuji, can gunas be like a uniform, like a form that the soul gets? Like, if you go to jail, the prisoner gets a uniform. So like a gradation of uniforms, that like a human body has, then, then there are uniforms like that. Something else.
The Bhagavatam the Gita is saying that the gunas form all of our forms. So our forms are manifested by the gunas, absolutely. But that is the result of the gunas in some ways. That's the effect of the gunas, and they are, formed by the gunas. So the Bhagavatam, this tells us that the gunas are shaktis, are three energies or powers of the Lord that are manifest from Krishna's Maya Shakti. So Maya, this material energy, is also Shakti of the Lord, an energy of the Lord. And that energy of the Lord divides into three, and it forms these three Shaktis powers are the gunas. And it's actually very scientific, and I'll show you why they must be energies. But before we get to that point, the first guna of goodness is called Jnana Shakti. It is the Shakti of knowledge. It illuminates things, like we said. Passion is Kriya Shakti, the Shakti of activity. And ignorance is Dravya Shakti, or the Shakti of, you could say Dravya means kind of like inertia. Inertia, kind of like Dravya is also just matter, material things. So Jnana, Kriya, and Dravya Shakti. And you might recall that Prabhupada, in our initial definition, defines them very similarly. He says, goodness conditions one to happiness. Jnana, knowledge, illumination. Passion is Kriya, or activity. And just, a lot of activity, hankering, desiring. And ignorance is Dravya Shakti, the power which causes inertia, lamentation, madness, hankering, grief. So these are the mode of ignorance. So why powers? Why energies? Because when we say, what is fire? If I ask you, what is fire? What is fire? Then fire is something that is a substance. It's something that has certain qualities. Fire heats you. Fire has, or rather, I should say, fire has heat. It has qualities of, illumination, heat, And then it also has capacities. Fire can burn things. It also displaces other things, right? So it's not just that fire has its own attributes, but it also has attributes that affect others, which are more like capacities or positional properties, displacement properties, things that affect others. So the gunas operate very much like this. They're powers because they are substances, they're attributes, and they are also capacities, all three. They also have, just like the eye, right? The eye that I have here, right? It's a substance, it's an eyeball. It has attributes, it has certain colors, but then it also has capacities. An eye can see. So it's not just a substance, it's not just a color, it's not just an attribute, but it's also a capacity. The eye has a certain capacity, it can see others. In the same way, the gunas manifest all three of these things. They are substances like tables and chairs. They have colors like consciousness, we were saying, modes of consciousness. And the gunas also lead to certain results. They also have certain capacities and ways in which they affect us and they affect others. So therefore, they're called Shaktis or powers. And these are the names of the Shaktis, of these three Shaktis. So, and this is how chapter 13 connects with chapter 14. Last time, you might recall, we were discussing this table and we were talking about the 24 elements of the material nature. And we talked about Ahankara and we talked about the Lord's Maya and all the 24 elements that you see here with their presiding demigods. But the part that we missed intentionally is the three gunas. So the three gunas, the Jnana Shakti, Sattva, Kriya Shakti, Rajas, and Dravya Shakti, Tamas, they come directly from Maya. And everything comes in this material world, all the 24 elements, they come out of the three gunas.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I have a question here.
Yes.
So how this Shaktis are influenced? Is it by the soul or by the Paramatma, or what? How we understand the play of these different gunas?
Okay, that's a very nice question. So that's exactly the question. That is what we'll talk about now. So these shaktis here, like you're asking Raj very nicely, that so here it says that how Jnana Shakti, it produces the mind. So Sattva produces the mind and the sense devatas, all the demigods. The Rajas, the Kriya Shakti, it produces all the senses. Because it's through the senses that we do activity, right? So therefore it's in the mode of passion. And Dravya Shakti, ignorance, it produces the dead material elements. Sound, touch, earth, water, fire. Now the question that comes up is, well, a devotee also has hands, feet, and nose. So is the devotee just the fact that they use their senses? Are they in the mode of passion? And, the deity of the Lord is made out of earth. So if earth is produced from Dravya Shakti, from the mode of ignorance, then is the deity, a manifestation of ignorance? Not possible, no. And then some of the demigods, like Indra, they're sometimes very, very passionate. So why are they in the mode of goodness? Why not in the mode of passion? So it's important to understand how the gunas act, and they act in different ways. In terms of creation, the mode of ignorance, or you could say the mode of inertia, is more prominent in these gunas. The gross material elements is more prominent in these elements: earth, water, fire, ether. So because the mode of ignorance is more prominent, ignorance is producing this. But just like yin and yang in Taoist philosophy, in the material world, there's no pure mode. There's always some rajas, some sattva. So according to the amount of sattva and rajas, you get different variations of the modes. As I mentioned last time, that the gunas are like three colors, and how all the world's colors are produced from three colors, right? Three fundamental colors. They combine in different ways and they produce all the world's colors. So in the same way, when there's more sattva, then there's fire. When there's more tamas, then there's earth. So in terms of creation, this is how the gunas act. But in this context, tamas does not have the negative context that tamas has when we speak of the way it conditions the consciousness. You see, there's a big difference there. Just like they say in Taoist philosophy, yin and yang, one is light, one is darkness. They're very clear in their philosophy. They say that yin, which is the dark one, is not a negative force. It's not good versus evil. Yin is just one aspect of the universe. There are two aspects. There's always night and there's always day. And sometimes a day can be very mode of ignorance, right? During the day, a person can do a criminal activity. And sometimes at night, one could be chanting all night and it could be very much in the mode of goodness. So they make the point that night and day in of themselves are not good and bad. They're just two complementary aspects of this universe. In the same way, the mode of ignorance in terms of creation does not hold any negative connotation. It is simply the quality of that element, that is inertia. Therefore, it is produced of Dravya Shakti. Very key point here. It's very important. Ignorance in of itself is not a bad thing. It's an energy of the Lord. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi. This Gunamayi, Krishna is saying, is divine and it is my energy. Kriya Shakti, or the mode of passion, is prominent in the senses. This is how activity takes place. But certain senses are more conditioned by goodness and less by ignorance, and others are more conditioned by ignorance and less by goodness. For example, the ears are the way that we go back to God at hearing, right? So it's more conditioned by the mode of goodness. The ears here, ear right here. Whereas the anus is more conditioned by the mode of ignorance, obviously, right? So that is, but because there are senses of activity, they're primarily in the mode of passion. And then the Jnana Shakti, it produces the demigods, but the demigods are demigods because they are actually present in the spiritual, they're present in the mode of goodness. Therefore, they become demigods. Now, when you're in the mode of goodness and you're not on the spiritual platform, there'll always be some passion also. There'll always be some ignorance. So Indra becomes very often overcome by passion. The different demigods, the mode of passion and ignorance affect them. But the primary mode that they're situated in is goodness, and therefore that's where they are, you see. So very important point here. Same thing with the mind, right? The mind is born from the mode of goodness, but it can be completely in the mode of ignorance based upon what our atmosphere is in. It can be also in the mode of passion. And the intelligence can also be in the mode of goodness if it's used in Krishna's service. But because fundamentally the mind is more in the mode of goodness, is meant to be there, its nature is like that, it's produced from the Jnana Shakti. It's primarily produced from the Jnana Shakti. And therefore it's such an important vehicle in our service to the Lord, as we've been discussing. So these modes, they act in different ways, and in the context of creation, they're not good or bad. They have different functions. Now, in terms of consciousness, they have good or bad effects. If you're in the mode of ignorance, your consciousness will degrade you. In terms of consciousness, if we're in the mode of passion, we'll become very passionate. So that's my response. Do you have a follow-up to this? Raj Prabhu, you raised your hand.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. But I'm still a little confused, Prabhuji. I understand that all these different modes or energies of the Lord and how it is used in the creation. I totally get it. But for example, if I am in mode of ignorance and I want to change myself to mode of goodness, does it mean I have to focus more on the mind rather than intelligence because it is born from the mode of goodness? So is there any way I have a control, or it's just because I am because sometimes, you hear people say it's his nature. He will be like that. So does it mean like
Yes.
I have little control or no control, or
So
can you
that's
please explain that truth?
Thank you for reminding me. So that is the next important point now to understand that. So the guna that will affect our consciousness is determined by the atmosphere that we keep. So exactly, if we're next to material things all the time, if our world is a world of matter, cars, homes, you could say material things, our consciousness will go more in ignorance. If our world is like Einstein, always in the mind, right? Thinking, becoming theories, making discoveries, then if that's the atmosphere we are in, we will cultivate the mode of passion within us. And Einstein actually says this in one place, that the pleasures of the mind, he says, are 1,000 times greater than the highest pleasure of the body. The pleasures of the mind are thousands of times greater than the pleasure than physical pleasures. He makes this point, and it's true. People who are like in construction and these things, like they feel pleasure in that activity, and for them that's their pleasure, in doing those things, and you see certain modes that go along with it: pride, power, prestige of building such a great building, and things like that. But then those who are more in the intellectual world, they don't care for those things. They measure their success not by the building they're living in, but by the discoveries that they make. So it's still pride, but it's a pride of a different type, that my success is based upon my fame and my intellectual success rather than the bank balance that I have. And then those in the mode of goodness, they measure their success by, their success in meditation. Like there's some 15-year-old boy in Nepal who for like 15 days at a time can sit without any water, just under a tree. He's mastered some meditational art. Just his mind is completely focused, just in deep meditation, and he's a true yogi. For 15-30 days he can just live without any water, and apparently people have done studies, even like modern scientists, that how is it physically possible for this person, after 3 days you're supposed to go into a coma without water. You would actually but then he just gets up and starts walking like normal after 15 days. So his sense of success is more in the area of the mind. So yes, if we want to change our modes, we have to change our atmosphere and do that. But in the case of a devotee, Krishna is saying, transcend the modes. Forget the modes altogether. Transcend the modes, become a devotee, serve me, which is the part we're getting to. And so therefore, those things are not relevant. And that's why we don't talk about them so much, because Krishna is saying transcend the modes. And so therefore, we're really not interested in moving to the mode of goodness. The goodness is also binding. But because goodness is closest, therefore Shuddha Sattva, there are things that are similar, meaning that Rupa Goswami says, engage your mind in Krishna's service, engage all your senses in Krishna's service, and therefore we use the senses and mind in Krishna's service. Also the intelligence also, but there are certain things. Now, one more point on this, and I'll take more questions at the end once I get through the slides, but just one more point on this, that that also in terms of varnas, the gunas play a major role. So you'll notice in Prabhupada's discussions, sometimes he talks about the kshatriyas, and he talks about the vaishyas and the shudras in terms of the gunas. So he says the shudras are in the mode of ignorance, the vaishyas are in the mode of passion, kshatriyas are in passion and goodness, and brahmanas are in goodness. At the same time, he says that the shudra can be a pure devotee of the Lord, the Vaishya can be a pure devotee of the Lord. So how is it possible that the Vaishya can be in the mode of passion and also be the pure devotee of the Lord? So this is again how we need to understand it, that the mode of passion is creating the nature of the Vaishya, because the Vaishya has to deal with money and all of these things. But the mode of passion is not necessarily dominating the consciousness of the Vaishya. See, the Shudra has to work, and he has to, he has to like their senses, even their body type. It's like down to earth. They're like a mountain, hard working, very physical in nature. The Brahmana may be more like head here and kind of, just not too much physical physique. So again, it's the gunas that's forming their psyche, but their consciousness is not being is not where their consciousness is. That's their choice. It's not being driven necessarily by those modes. It's not controlled by them. Second thing, and Mother Urmila told me this point, it's a very interesting point, is that in terms of the gunas and the varnas, for different varnas, there are different gunas that they have to be most cautious with. They have to be most aware of. Like we gave the example of the Harinam and things that we have to be cautious about, because the Shudra has to be most cautious about going the pleasures in the mode of ignorance. That, the grosser pleasures, they have to be aware of those. The Brahmanas, they are more likely to be conditioned by the mode of goodness. So they have to be more cautious about becoming attached to a peaceful life and not coming on the platform of love, but simply being on the platform of peace. The Kshatriya has to be very cautious about becoming too ambitious, right? Because if you're a leader, you can be too ambitious. And so these are the modes that will affect them the most, because those modes have created their persona. They are more likely to be affected by them. And therefore, the scriptures are saying, be more careful with these modes if you're that varna. See, so it's very interesting how these gunas act. And the key point here is that the gunas may create a certain person's body and physique, but they don't necessarily dominate the consciousness. But that is their weakness, because they're created by that mode. They need to be especially cautious about those modes. If the Brahmana falls down, his fall down will be reading a materialistic book. He wasted time reading a book that just wasted his time. If a Shudra falls down, then the fall down could be a more, it could be a fall down in terms of, sleeping too much, right? Sleeping too much, maybe 20 hours or 12 hours. So there's different fall downs that they have to be aware of. And then finally, this is just very short, 2 more slides here. So let me do that, and then might as well, and then we'll have questions. Then Krishna, so I'm going to skip this one. Krishna says in text 20, when the embodied being is able to transcend these 3 modes. So the reason he's telling us about the modes is not so that we can be in the modes. The point of telling about the modes is so we can transcend them. Is able to transcend these 3 modes associated with the material body. He can become free from birth, death, old age, and distress, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. Krishna is so compassionate. He is so kind to the souls. He's giving us this knowledge so that we can transcend the modes and enjoy nectar even in this life. We can actually become immortal. We can become so happy even in this life. How is that? By understanding the messages we have to tell ourselves we are not these modes. When we are feeling pulled down by one of these modes, mode of ignorance, mode of passion, we have to remind ourselves, I'm not these modes, I'm beyond the modes. And when we realize that, then we can enjoy nectar in this life. Arjuna inquired, "O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these 3 modes? What is his behavior, and how does he transcend the modes of nature?" So now Arjuna is saying, well, how do you recognize someone who has transcended the modes? What is his behavior? So that Arjuna is such a practical person. He's saying, so that we can also emulate that behavior. And how does that person transcend the 3 modes of material nature? Then in the next verse, Krishna does what he's done so many times in the Gita. And actually, it'll be a very interesting project. If someone wants to do it, I'd be very grateful to go through the Gita and see how many times Krishna actually does this, where he actually lists the qualities of a great devotee, of someone who's self-realized above the modes. I mean, we just had this in the last chapter, you might remember. We had this, I mean, I'm forgetting myself. I mean, like every single chapter, Krishna comes back to the same point. So, I mean, how important they are. I mean, it's actually very stark how many times Krishna tells us that we need to work in this consciousness. And what is this? I'll read this for all of you. The personality of God, it said, O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear. So we also cannot hate delusion. Aversion to something is another form of attachment. We just don't associate with it. We don't hate anything. Who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal toward the desirable and undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor. Again, Krishna cannot say this enough times throughout the Gita. If we're actually learning the Gita, we have to imbibe this. Who is equal, steady in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, meaning that that person works without any care for honor or dishonor. Who treats alike both friend and enemy, another very great message of the Gita. Friends and enemies are all the same for the devotee of the Lord, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature. So this is not something emotional or sentimental. It's not a, I scratch you, goody goody type philosophy. No, the effect of someone who has actually transcended the modes is that they have renounced material activities. They don't have interest in material activities anymore. And therefore, I cannot say that I've transcended the material modes because I still have interest in material activities. It's a fact. I see it in myself. I have interest in material activities. So therefore, renouncing the material modes or transcending the material modes is not easy. But when we are in difficulties, when we are in difficult situations, we can remind ourselves that I'm not the modes. And that will help us. So when we are feeling depressed, when we are feeling too happy or too hyper, just like too ambitious, when we're feeling, too, you could say, passionate, we can remind ourselves that I'm not these modes. I am beyond this. I am beyond it. Nothing will affect me, the soul. So then, last few verses, when one desires. This is not a verse, this is just an explanation of the previous verse. When one desires neither attainment of pleasure nor escape from pain, he has transcended the modes of nature. So this is the test. Who has transcended? When you don't desire pleasure, the thing that everyone is seeking, nor escape from pain. So pleasure and pain mean nothing to the material, to the devotee. That person has transcended the modes of nature. And this is a very high level of spiritual realization. The pure devotee of the Lord is so absorbed in their love for Krishna, they are not seeking or avoiding pleasure and pain. The embodied soul will always undergo dualities of loss and gain, but the liberated soul can remain unaffected by these things due to focusing his identity within. So dualities of loss and gain are the characteristics of someone in the modes, someone affected by the modes. But a liberated soul focuses on something you cannot lose or gain. That is yourself, the spiritual nature within us. That person focuses on Krishna, and therefore pain and pleasure become ephemeral to that devotee. They don't go away, but they become unimportant or ephemeral to that devotee. And then the conclusion here, how do you transcend it? This is when Krishna directly answers Arjuna's question. Very famous verse of the Gita. Mam chayo vibicharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati taitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So when we're fully engaged in devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, that is when we know we have transcended the modes of material nature, and that is also how we transcend the modes of material nature. Just to always be engaged in devotional service. If we're always in the spiritual mode, which is to the transcendental mode, then even though we are not on that level, if we're always working in that mode, the other modes will not be able to affect us. And therefore, we will have transcended the modes. If we're even if we are not light, but we're always surrounded by light, we will only be light, right? So in the same way, if we're engaged in devotional service, even though our consciousness is not there, and Raj, this answers your question, if we're continuously engaged in devotional service, that's what we need to do. If we start reading too many books, we'll be in the mode of goodness. But the problem with the material mode of goodness is that it's always mixed. There's no pure goodness. It's impossible. Only when we transcend the modes, we're in pure goodness. Therefore, it's Shuddha Sattva. If we're in material mode of goodness, eventually there'll be some section of some book that will pull us down into mode of passion and ignorance. And that's why the material process is good, it's maybe helpful, but it doesn't work. The material process of trying to, improve our mode by simply material solutions. Because that improvement works for some time, but again, patanti adha, the Bhagavatam says. Again, we fall to the lower modes. And then the last verse then, Krishna then establishes his own mode. Someone says, okay, well, Krishna, his body is Dravya Shakti, therefore his body is made of the mode of ignorance, and maybe he's also a little bit in passion, when he steals butter from Mother Yashoda. So Krishna clarifies, he settles it all. He says, Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasvas yasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya ekantikasya cha. Such a beautiful verse. Asya, asya, asya. And I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman. Brahmano hi pratishtaham. This sentence is actually a very strong argument against Mayavadis. If you meet a Mayavadi, you can say this one sentence, it settles it. Krishna is saying, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. He's saying, pratishtha, foundation, Brahmano hi, I am the foundation of Brahman. It's not that Brahman is my foundation. I am Brahman's foundation. Brahman comes from me, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is a constitutional position of ultimate happiness. Once again, I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is a constitutional position of ultimate happiness. Okay, I'm done with my slides. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Stop here.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for wonderful class. We are very, very, very grateful to you. Prabhu, this picture is a very common picture in Bhagavad Gita where it is showed the three gunas. And I really have not understand this picture ever. And would you elaborate a little bit on this picture? Like when you say energies of the Lord, is it like like Ganga Devi. Ganga Devi is personified. But she is, so is it like gunas are also like personified, and what are they trying to explain here in the picture?
Is this the picture you're referring to?
Prabhu, this page, Bhagavad Gita page number, yes, Prabhu, yes.
This is the one on the screen? Okay.
Yes, Prabhu, yes, thank you so much.
Yes. So this is showing basically, so you have Krishna, right? Krishna is the source of everything. Aham bija pradapta. Krishna is the source of the souls. Krishna is also the source of Maya. Maya is one of its Shaktis. So this is, a little bit of an artistic imagination, you could say. But here Maya Devi has taken 3 forms. So this Maya Devi, Gunamayi, is composed of the 3 gunas. And these Shaktis could be personified as three forms of Maya. And these Shaktis, these gunas, they are what are driving people in this world. It's the modes that they're born with in some ways, and also that they cultivate. But then those modes that they cultivate further drive them to do certain things. Like, to give you an example, why this is not, everything that we do is not our own choice. It is our own choice, but it's not immediately voluntary. Example is this. Just like if someone comes and says obscenities to me, curses me, my immediate reaction will be, if I'm in the mode of passion, to curse that person back. And that's what people do, right? I mean, if someone comes and punches me, I punch them back. I don't even think that is how I'm driven. So therefore you see here, the modes are like, we are like a puppet. When we have the mode of passion in us, we will respond in a certain way. So then someone says, okay, so do I not have free will? Is it all deterministic? No, because we do have the choice of cultivating a certain guna, a certain mode. But the point is that once we have cultivated a certain mode of nature, then we will be driven by that mode. You see, that's the point. So based on my association, I can cultivate the mode of goodness. But if I don't cultivate that mode, and I cultivate instead passion and ignorance, then my life will be driven by the mode of passion. And that's what this is showing.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, can I add to this, Prabhuji? Prabhuji, they said that, I heard in the class, for the mode of goodness, the rope is longer. So the reaction time that we get is longer. For passion, it's like very short. So we react very, for me, I react very easily. So the ropes are short and long based on the modes that we carry.
Yes, and there's also more freedom, right? If the rope is longer, you have more freedom. So the mode of goodness, we're actually more free. This is why Krishna says the regulated principles of freedom. When we follow rules and regulations, when our senses are controlled, then we're actually more free. And this is a fact. We see like people who struggle with intoxication, drugs or intoxication, they're actually less free because they are forced to take an intoxicant that they don't want to take. So the intoxication actually limits your performance. And when we are more in the mode of goodness, we have more flexibility, but still we are bound. So therefore, the main idea is to transcend the modes by cutting those ropes altogether. Nice point, very nice point. Kishore Prabhu, Kishore. Kishore Prabhu, you have a question? Okay, Swati Mataji, you have a question?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Thank you for the wonderful class. Prabhuji, on I think 14.27, the last slide that we did, it was mentioned that the impersonal Brahman is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So how is impersonal Brahman the constitutional position of ultimate happiness? Shouldn't it be like the personal realization of Bhagavan?
Yes. So, see, Krishna here is saying, I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is a constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So, Brahman, so this is the idea of oneness and difference, you see, because Krishna is saying, I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman. So, Brahman is also not separate from Krishna. Brahman refers to Krishna. It's a name of Krishna. So Brahman is Krishna, but it's if the impersonal Brahman taken without the context of Krishna, that does not have that ultimate happiness. It is Sat and it is Chit. It is eternal and it is full of knowledge. But Brahman, in relation to Krishna, is the position of ultimate happiness, because Brahman is part of Krishna. It's just like to say the sunshine gives me heat. Well, actually, it's the sun that gives you heat, but the sunshine carries that heat. And the sunshine cannot be thought about without the sun. The sun and the sunshine are both interrelated. So, in the same way, Krishna and Brahman, so to say, are one and the same, yet they're also different. But in the sense that they are the same, it is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. It's a good observation. Yes. Pushpanjali Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for the class. I have a question about the exam. So the essay question said that we need to write the summary of all the 18 chapters. And I started writing even with 1 or 2 sentences about each chapter. It was like 830 words. So just wanted to clarify what you're looking for. And, is it the essence of like, can we write like essence of 6 chapters, 6 chapters, 6 chapters like that? Or if you're writing for each one, it is getting to be a little long.
Yes. Actually, honestly, what I'm looking for is pretty much the theme of each chapter. So chapter 14, 3 modes of material nature. Chapter 13, Arjuna's 6 questions, Krishna's response. Chapter chapter 12, the yoga ladder. It's the succession of the principles of yoga, right? The theme was the yoga ladder. So like this, because in our preaching, when we are dealing and discussing with others, then we oftentimes, it's very difficult. We have to remember, okay, which chapter is saying this? Then we get, okay, chapter 18 says this, chapter 17 says this. So in this way, we get a very, very nice picture of the Gita in our mind. We get a quick picture that, okay, this is the entire Gita right here. Now, it may not be possible to do it in the short words that I've described, and that's okay. I won't take points off if it's too long. But I wanted to give you that short word count just so that you think in this way that, okay, what is, if I was on television and they said in 2 minutes, tell me what is the essence of the Gita, or what is the summary of the Gita. So you can go chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, like this. It's on your fingertips.
Okay, Prabhuji, I got it. I have another question, but I'll wait for my turn after others have asked. Thank you so much.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Gopal Govinda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the nice class, and as usual, wonderful discussions. My questions are a little bit at a basic level. The first simple question is, we use the word mind. Mind is English word. Mm-hmm. And even in your slides, I found the word buddhi as well. Buddhi at the level of passion, and the mind at the level of goodness. So how do you translate buddhi in English?
So the Sanskrit word for mind is manas.
Manas.
So mind, yes. And buddhi, buddhi is the Sanskrit word for intelligence. But there's also something called chitta, which is oftentimes identified with buddhi, which may or may not be the same thing, depending on the context. So here, I'll go back here to this slide, and here. Oh, wait. There we go. Yes. So there's also Mahatattva, and that's Chitta. Chitta is sometimes also called intelligence, but this is more like consciousness, where there's it's different. So buddhi is just intelligence. Yeah, buddhi is the intelligence that we think of in terms of our day-to-day activity of intelligence.
Yeah, in the other verses, in the extension for this, in in Manasamhita, we hear the verse. I don't remember exactly that one should give away the buddhi to Lord as the Barbadhu. They say that like the wife of Lord, so that it's not yours anymore. Likewise, so I was just trying to think, like, if buddhi word is used there, intelligence, if you're translating to intelligence, but intelligence is at the mode of passion.
No, see, that's why I was explaining to you that, I mean, Prabhupada obviously used his intelligence in the service of Krishna. But everything in this world has you could say, a primary quality, right? So like we were saying, the earth is used to build a deity of the Lord. So earth is not in ignorance, the deity is not in ignorance, but the quality of tamas is prominent in earth because of inertia. And so it's different than the modes affecting a consciousness as opposed to what it manifests. So in the same way, the prominent quality of buddhi is passion, that it's produced of. The prominent quality of the mind is goodness. And therefore, our acharyas, in terms of bhakti, they focus more on the mind than the intelligence, because the mind is a more natural medium. Why is the mind produced from intelligence? Because its nature is more goodness, and it becomes a more convenient or useful medium for the worship of the Lord. So key point here there is that Rupa Goswami says, always remember Krishna, never forget him. This is the only rule, this is the only regulation. Because the focus is on the mind, you see. So mind is a very powerful means to Krishna, because it does form the core, it does form a very important element in the process of bhakti. Whereas intelligence is also needing to be used in bhakti, but it's actually not as important, because our intelligence will fail us. I was actually just hearing this morning a class by Gauranga Prabhu, and he said that success in the material world, he was speaking on Chaitanya Charitamrita, the success in the material world is based upon our intelligence. He was saying it's based upon our skill, our intelligence. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we see that the devotee's success, it is primarily based upon the desire to please the Guru, the desire to please the devotee of the Lord, which is not really a phenomenon of the intelligence, it's a phenomenon of the mind. And by their mercy, it gets fulfilled. So, because otherwise, smartness would have been a qualification for devotional service. But a person may be a complete fool, but if he wants to satisfy the spiritual master, Krishna gives intelligence from within on how to do that. So the main thing is the place, the space and the place of the mind.
That's a beautiful answer, Prabhu. Wonderful. Thank you so much. One more is there on the same line, is that we use the word mode of goodness. And especially this is, I'm confused, and I think I know a little bit understanding, but I just want to bring it up to be better understand it. We use the word mode of goodness, and we also hear the instructions like stay in the transcendental mode. So transcendental, being in transcendental or mode of goodness, there's a subtle difference. I know that goodness is the one of the three gunas, and transcendental, being in the Krishna's consciousness, but this is exchanged quite often, like interchangeably in the conversations, in the text. So become confusing also.
Yes. Yes. So actually, I didn't distinguish between those two. See, if we're just in the material mode of goodness, then we truly are not, because there is no pure goodness. So we can move towards goodness. We should try to establish ourselves in goodness, even if we're not a devotee, so that if we have a fall down, our fall down is still in the mode of goodness. So even if we're not a devotee, still the devotee, follows the principles of society in terms of, let's say, marriage and these things, so that even if a person falls from the spiritual path, their fall is not very far. They're already there. But transcendental means that we are not attached to being peaceful. We are not attached to being knowledgeable. We're not attached to even being, attached to the rules and regulations. We are attached to serving Krishna. And serving Krishna is, like this. It is very nice. It is very much in the mode of goodness. So therefore, that's very natural. But that is the point, that the devotee can be very active and very ambitious for Krishna, and that is transcendental. So the transcendental is like taking the flight. The mode of goodness is like going to the airport. So in order to take the flight, we go to the airport, but just going to the airport doesn't put us on the flight.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you. Kishore Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Dhanapram. Thanks for the wonderful class. Prabhu, when we reading this third chapter, Karma Yoga, like in 3.27, Krishna talks about Prakriti, Kriman, and Gunaya, right? That he's saying that the spirit soul bewildered by the influence of false ego thinks himself the doer of activities that are actually carried out by the three modes of material nature. So, does it mean the three modes of material nature is given by Krishna, or but here we are talking about transcending three modes of material nature, right? How can we understand this in this context,
So this is a very common, question in terms of the Gita, the interplay between agency and determinism, meaning that Krishna here is saying, I think this is your question. He's saying that everything is carried out by the modes of material nature. Everything is carried out by the modes of material nature. What is our agency? Right? This is your question. What is our role? And then how can we transcend the modes if everything is being carried out by the modes? And so in chapter 13, Krishna answered this question in one of the verses. He said that the workings of this world are due to material nature, but happiness and distress is due to the soul. So once we choose a certain guna, that guna will pretty much drive us. But which guna we choose, that is up to us. We still have freedom and free will. So the gunas are performing everything, so we don't have any reason to be proud, because without the help of the gunas, we cannot even lift our hand. Without the help of Prakriti, we cannot lift our hand. But one thing that we can take credit for, and Prabhupada actually says this, is that if Prakriti is lifting our hand for us, how we use that hand, that is our decision. That is our free will. That is our choice. So if my hand is so beautiful that I can become the star tennis player, right? In every single Olympics I win, I cannot be proud because the hand was given by God. I cannot be proud of that, because this hand by which I became the tennis champion is not my hand, it's the Lord's hand, and it's all being done by the Lord. But the decision to play tennis, that is my decision.
Okay.
You see? And so therefore, I have no reason to be proud if I win it, but I still have a reason to take responsibility, and I still do get the credit of choosing to do that, and also choosing to be so focused to keep practicing to do that. That is, I do have freedom and free will in that way. But on the other hand, if I use that hand in the service of Krishna, then that is my choice. But then if I serve Krishna very nicely, I have to remember it's a combined effort, because if Krishna gave me the nice hand, therefore I'm able to paint the deity so nicely. So I have some credit, but I don't have all the credit. In fact, most of the credit goes to material nature. Because reason being why? Because two people will play tennis, they'll make the same choices, but one person will be successful, another not. Why? Because of material nature. Material nature gave one person a better hand, the other person a less good hand, but both of them made the same effort. Both of them made the same choices.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Nice one. Rohan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Nanda Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Thank you.
Thank you for the very nice class, Prabhu. Prabhu, I had a question. So you spoke about the modes that we are born with versus the modes we cultivate. So you made a nice point about the Shudras. They have to be most cautious about the pleasures in the mode of ignorance. The Brahmanas, they're most likely to be conditioned by the mode of goodness. And a Kshatriya has to be cautious about being too ambitious. So you said that the gunas, they create a particular body, but they don't necessarily dominate the consciousness of the person.
Yes.
In also in the third chapter, Krishna says that everyone is forced to act according to the modes one has acquired. So does this suggest that once we take to devotional service, we are able to identify what mode we're being controlled by, and hence we can cultivate a particular mode?
Okay, very nice question. I understand your question. Yes. So like another example, nice way to understand this is that you'll notice this is very true when individuals, when they get sick, it's generally, it'll always be one side of their body that gets sick. So like they get an ear infection, it'll be the left ear. If it's an eye problem, it'll be the left eye. If it's a knee problem, it'll be the left knee. So in our body, we have a stronger side and we have a weaker side. We have a stronger arm, it's your right arm, and a weaker. And so when there is a disease, the first to fall is the weaker side, right? So it's the same way in terms of the modes of nature. The modes of nature have created our body. And so based upon the body that they've created, we have a certain weakness. So like you're saying, in the case of the Vaishya or the Kshatriya, the weakness is they can be too ambitious and passionate. So the first thing to affect them will be ambition or passion. That's a weakness. Now, when they become devotees, because they still have that body, that same body is there, then as devotees, they will still have to be cautious about those obstacles or anarthas on the path. Maybe anger might be their problem because the mode of passion is strong in them. And so they just have to be cautious that, okay, I have to work on my anger because it's the weaker side. It's the weaker part. For someone, who is, engaged in more intellectual activity, too much reading of books can be a weakness, or too much mental speculation, twisting everything. Like, okay, there's a philosophical point, and then you have to, rather than just, I know one person like this. It's not just theoretical speaking. His mind is so intellectual. Anything you say to him, he'll find some mistake in it, or some problem or some contradiction, right? So he is a disciple of Satchidananda Swami, and Satchidananda Swami has thousands of disciples. So that's why I'm mentioning, because you can't figure out who he is by this. But he is a disciple of Satchidananda Swami. And one time he was speaking to his Guru Maharaj, and he asked a very sincere question. And he said, Guru Maharaj, please tell me, how can I please you? How can I serve you? And Satchidananda Maharaj, he gave a very, very wonderful answer, like a very deep, satisfying answer. And then sure enough, it's his nature. So then he starts to pick it apart and says, like a little bit like Arjuna, but a bit too much, right? That, well, in your answer, first you said this, and then you said this. So now which one should I focus on, Guru Maharaj? And won't these two things be in contradiction? And this middle point that you made was just not clear enough. Can you explain it in light of the first point? And then Satchidananda Maharaj, after that, finally he says, you see, I gave you a nice cake, It's a beautiful cake that I gave you. Now just eat it. Don't pick it apart and analyze it so much that by the time you come to eat the cake, you're only left with oil and sugar all melted out and all separate, you see. So that is the thing. As devotees, we transcend the modes, but we still have our material bodies. So we have to be aware and conscious of the modes that are most influencing us, and that can actually really help us in our progress in spiritual life.
Thank you very
So
much.
can I add add a little point to this? I've personally thought about it. Like, suppose our mode of nature is passionate, and when we were karmis, and we would use it towards passionate, but when we become devotees, same mode of nature, we use it in the service of Lord.
Yes.
So that's like dovetailing the whole mode, but same passion, but using in the service of Lord. Suppose I'm running outside and doing errands, but instead of doing only my errands, I'm doing grocery for the temple, or doing errands for the temple. So that's same passion, but used in the service of the Lord. Just a simple example.
You brought a very nice point, and you actually put the positive spin on it. But on the flip side, therefore, if that's our weakness, we can use that in the service of the Lord and make it into a strength, right? So if we're very, very intellectual, this devotee is actually an intellectual, we can become a scholar and use our intellectual capacity in the service of the Lord. In the same way, we can use our passion in the service of the Lord, because many devotees are super passionate. They're very, kind of powerful, controlling individuals, and they make very good managers, because a manager has to be strong. It's just the nature of it. But then they have to be aware of the risk of it. That, well, okay, now I'm in a position, I'm dealing with devotees, I could take it too far, right? So it can be both a asset and it can be both a hindrance. But therefore, recognizing our nature is very important and working accordingly. Yes. Thank you. Very nice. Thank you. Brandy, your question is next.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So I had two questions, but I'll just start with this one. So you said that if we die in the mode of ignorance, then we come back in the animal kingdom, animal life form. So is that to say, and I know I get caught up in at what happens after we die a lot, and I know it's not black and white, but is that to say our overall consciousness and where our mode is generally situated, or what if we also pass away during an activity that's in the mode of ignorance? Do you understand?
Yes. So what is the consciousness that is dominating us at the time of our death? So that doesn't necessarily mean what we're exactly doing at that time. We may be doing something that's very active, but what is dominating our consciousness, meaning what is the mode of our consciousness? So someone, see the gunas, they affect our consciousness, and that's one way that they act, and it's a very unique way in which they act. The rest of the gunas is more functional. They have a functional aspect. So their consciousness may be dominated by the mode of goodness, let's say, but they might be performing a very passionate activity at that time. But still, their consciousness at the time of death is in goodness, because that's what's dominating their consciousness, their mindset, their nature, so to say. Their consciousness is not nature exactly. Nature is different, but is there overall, because the subtle body is a combination of these three gunas. So overall, are they more in the mode of ignorance? And therefore, it's based upon what the consciousness that dominates us at the time of death, but that is developed from activities done throughout our life. Right? The subtle body is something that's gradually formed over the course of many years, over the course of our life. And so therefore, it really is the way we've led our whole life. But the reason it's at the time of death is because someone may come to Krishna consciousness 2 years before they die. and therefore their dominant consciousness has changed completely.
Mm.
So it is a result of your life's activity, but it's really your life's activity leading up to the point of death. And if your life's activity drastically changes a few months before you die, your consciousness may be different, or even a moment before. Like the Bhagavatam says, Maharaj Khatvanga, he surrendered to the Lord. His life changed, happened literally moments before he died, and he went back home, back to Godhead. So that's very rare. But the point is, this is why at the time of death, because when do we actually change? The final test is what our consciousness is at the time of death.
Mm. Okay, I really liked that answer. That helped. Thank you. And then my other question was, whenever you're referring to a verse, I can't remember if I wrote down which verse that was, but you're referring to Krishna stating that I am the seed-giving Father, and material nature being our mother. So I understand that for this analogy, but how should we view Radharani then? Because I've kind of looked at her as like a maternal figure. So what should our consciousness be?
Yes, a very good question. She is our original mother. That is the best way to see Radharani. She's because, see, in one sense we say, she's sort of the female aspect of God, but she's Hladini Shakti. Her role is a servant of God. I mean, her role with Krishna is of service. She is a devotee. She's the best devotee in terms of the mood that she has, right? So she is not Aham Bija Pradapata. She is not the seed-giving father. She is not, in terms of her role and mood, she's not God. She is the devotee of God. And so she is the energy of the Lord. She is the original energy of the Lord. And actually, her expansion becomes the material energy, which here is being said, the mother, material nature. And so therefore, she is the original mother, because her expansion is this material nature, it's the material energy. So the devotee of the Lord sees her as the original mother, and Krishna as the original father. It's very much the case. Just very ideal, actually. That analogy is very apt for this verse.
Okay, thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Good questions. Yes. And next in line we have Divya Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Dhanvat Jai Shri Prabhupada. Thank you for the wonderful class, Prabhuji. So I have a question, little apart from this topic. So we were reading Bhagavatam, and in that, in Prithu Maharaj's meeting, with four Kumaras, we were reading at text 13. So in that, Prabhupada, in his purport, mentioned that Kshatriya has a nature of their killing. So they have to practice the killing heart. So that's why they kill the animals and all. It's their part of nature. So such things are not auspicious, is what Prabhupada mentioned. And he told that there are four kinds of sinful activities, like associating women for illicit sex, eating meat, intoxication, and gambling are allowed for Kshatriyas. So I just had a doubt that why, because these are like breaking the four regulative principles. So why Prabhupada mentioned is it allowed for Kshatriyas? I'm not able to understand that point. So
Yes.
can you please explain that?
Very nice. And actually, after the class, or whenever you get time, if you could share the verse number on our WhatsApp group, that'll be very nice.
Sure.
This is actually a very important verse that you brought out, one that's very controversial, so to say, but very instructive.
Yeah, sure.
And because you find Prabhupada there is saying that, but you find that in the Vedas also, like mentioned where the Kshatriyas, they can eat meat or they can go hunting, and this is the key thing between the difference between Varna Ashram without bhakti and Varna Ashram with bhakti, and why it's different. Because Maharaj Yudhishthira, for example, he is a Kshatriya. He's in the Varna of a Kshatriya. But his nature is very different. Like, although he's a Kshatriya, he doesn't behave in an aggressive, revengeful manner in the way that the Kshatriya does. And furthermore, there's one conversation in the Mahabharata where Yudhishthira Maharaj, he's almost cursing his Varna. He's saying, how nonsensical is this Varna that we have? How sinful is our Varna? Our very Varna, our very nature, our very occupation is one of killing. And he resents the fact that he's born with that nature, so to say. He has that nature. Because he says the other Varnas, they're so fortunate. They don't have to engage in this ghastly, thing. And you see how throughout the Mahabharata, he's compassionate, he's forgiving, and he almost puts himself and his brothers in trouble because of this. And so Prabhupada, in many places, he calls devotees Brahmanas. He says a Vaishnava is a Brahmana. A Vaishnava is, Vaishnava is a devotee. Why? Because when we make advancement in spiritual life, and here I mean we become very advanced. When we become very advanced, we don't any longer belong in one of these Varnas. We are actually transcendental to the Varnas, and therefore we start to lose the nature of these Varnas. So we cannot imitate it at the beginning stage. We don't have that. So therefore we have to act according to our Varna. But Krishna makes it crystal clear in the Gita that he who is liberated has no duty. Krishna says this. I think it was chapter 3 or 4, I cannot remember, but he says this. I think chapter 3. He says, he who is liberated has no duty. He has no duty to perform. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, for the pure devotee of the Lord can, the Brahmana can perform the work of a Kshatriya, and the Kshatriya can perform the work of a Brahmana. And so they can act in any of the Varnas because they're not being conditioned by the gunas anymore. At the same time, because the qualities of a Brahmana are most closest to the quality of a devotee, which is forgiveness, compassion, lack of passion. A devotee's natural qualities tends to match more the quality of a Brahmana. So you can have a pure devotee like Maharaj Yudhishthira or Arjuna who are also Kshatriyas. But because they are just not passionate, they don't like to engage in all this warfare, which is a necessary part, sometimes, of human society to protect the weak from the strong when all good argument fails. Because they don't really like those things, their nature becomes more Brahminical. Maharaj Yudhishthira, the sages come and listen from him. He loves being in the forest. He loves living in the hermitage. So as we advance in spiritual life, our nature will become more Brahminical because the nature of a Vaishnava so happens that it matches the nature of the Brahmana. Why? Because both of them are focusing more on the mode of goodness. The Brahmana is in goodness, but not in pure goodness, and the devotee is in pure goodness. Now, as a service of the Lord, for the service of the Lord, the devotee can also do the role of a Kshatriya. And especially if that devotee has a body of a Kshatriya, they have the physical strength of a Kshatriya, they will do that service for the Lord because they're suited for it, maybe. On the instruction of the Lord, they will, because that's the Lord's desire. So now in terms of regular Kshatriyas who aren't devotees, yes, indeed, I mean, they have to go and fight wars. So they have to go hunting. They sometimes even have to eat meat. Why? To make the hard. So it's not exactly that they really like killing. That's not the point. The point is that in a situation of confrontation in terms of war and in terms of fighting bad elements, they are capable of doing it. They're not looking forward to it, but they are capable. They have that nature in them. They're capable of doing that if they are a pious Kshatriya. Now, in every Varna, there's people who are pious and impious. If they're an impious Kshatriya, because they have that nature, they will enjoy killing. And that's what you're reading. But that doesn't mean that that's the ideal kshatriya. The ideal kshatriya is Lord Ram. Lord Ram, did not eat any meat. Lord Ram did not like to kill. Uh, he also had the nature of a kshatriya, but he was the ideal kshatriya. But he could do those things. The point is, he could fight in a battle, whereas a brahmana cannot even handle it. They'll get a nervous breakdown if they have to go and shoot arrows at someone. The brahmana hides under the bed, and there's no shame for him. But the kshatriya has to go out and fight.
So, Prabhuji, is it due to their nature they're allowed to do this, or I mean, as a Kshatriya, they are allowed to do this, and it's in their nature. That's why the Veda says that okay, they are allowed to do it.
Allowed to do it according to religious principles. So, because the Vedas recognize that there's people with that nature, and secondly, they realize that it is also a function of society that is necessary. The policemen can go and take arms and whatever, do law and order in the way that is compassionate but necessary, whereas a school teacher may not do that, and therefore the policeman will be dominated by a certain mode of nature, and therefore in Vedic scriptures, if they work according to the rules and regulations, like even the eating of meat, they must do it according to the rules and regulations of the scriptures. At the same time, it's a concession according to their nature. At the same time, they don't have to do that because in a kshatriya, there's a influx of goodness and passion. So they can choose if they want to be more in the mode of goodness or more in the mode of passion. But if they are in the mode of passion, the scriptures have given rules and regulations by which, according to those rules, they can work according to their nature.
Sure. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Krishna.
Raj Prabhu, you have a question. Okay, Ambika Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. So actually we were just talking about, at the time of death, my question is sort of a follow-up question of, I think, the question Brandy Mataji had, and then I had another question. So I I think it's been almost now 12 weeks. During when we were doing chapter 12, I did mention that my aunt, who is very dear to me, she was given a 24-hour notice, and we were doing chapter 2. I had that question, how do I handle myself? And in fact, she just left her body 2 days back. So it's like, but in last 3 months, she was suffering a lot. She had that extra time, and but we saw that she was suffering a lot. So in a way it's good that she has left the world. So this question that raised in my mind is, she was a very kind-hearted person. She was more like always acting in a mode of goodness, helping everybody, very social person. But now that I think about in what state of consciousness she has left the body, I'm not sure, because obviously I was not around, she's in India. So, and obviously in last 3 months she was suffering a lot physically. So uh, I think it was more like physical pain. And the last time when I see her or saw her on Sunday, she for last couple of weeks she wasn't even able to eat, digest anything. So last time when I spoke to her, I just saw her actually last Sunday, and she was not even able to sort of digest or anything, anything, not digest, but at least not able to even swallow food. And she was mostly feeling drowsy and sleepy. So I even though she had most of her life was for, other than the last 3 months, more like in a mode of goodness. The last couple of months it wasn't goodness. I think, I don't know, maybe some was goodness, some was and even some bhakti also. She was a devotee of Krishna also. So I mean, what will be her next destination? I'm assuming it's more like, somewhere in the goodness and some purity and some bhakti. But I believe when she was leaving the body, I don't think so she was able to think about the Lord or anything else, something devotional.
Yes. So sometimes we can go back to Godhead because of the mercy of the devotee, and because the devotees are around us, they instill that consciousness in us at that time, or the prayers of the devotees. So I mean, ultimately, it is due to our own consciousness that I mean, generally, not ultimately. I mean, generally, it is our own consciousness that leads us to the next life, and that no one can say. There's no way to know from the outside where exactly that person went. There may be some signs that reveal certain indications, but ultimately, that's between the soul and Krishna. We don't know where that person was at their last moment. Why? Because no one could ask them. After that, they left, right? So it's completely between them and Krishna. But the exception to that is the mercy and prayers of the devotees. And those are very, very powerful elements. So whatever their consciousness was, if all of you are praying for her, if all of you are thinking of her, and this is why there's a long tradition in India. People, they give charity to the Brahmanas, or they do a feast in Vrindavan, or offer some arti to Lord Nrsimhadev for the departed soul. Why? Because that adds to their consciousness. That mercy travels to them, and that helps them. So, that's beyond the gunas. This is, our gunas are our gunas, but then the mercy of the Lord that breaks through the gunas.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for reminding the importance of the devotional service. Praying for the soul, the departed soul. Because that's what we believe, that the soul doesn't get body for the next 13 days or something. For some time. The soul doesn't get the body right away. So I think the more we chant for her, pray for her, hopefully in the next life she will get a body where she will do devotional service. More devotional service.
Yes,
So,
thank you very
thank you.
much.
So Prabhuji, my question.
Maybe I'll come back to you.
Okay.
And then I think it's a good system, actually. It'll keep everyone alive. So we'll keep going. Raj Prabhu, I think now you're unmuted. You can ask the question.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I'm sorry, I was asking question in the mute. Thank you so much for the wonderful class, Prabhuji. I don't have questions, but I have some sort of takeaway, but you can clarify if I am wrong. So my understanding is that material goodness is not equal to like Sutta Sattva, means pure goodness. And I mean, we can have dominating nature, but we can develop consciousness that could avert our dominating nature. And we can make our weakness a strength by participating in devotional service, focusing on our weakness. Thus we can move to transcendental nature, and we are above these gunas.
Yes.
By association of devotees. Is that a correct takeaway, Prabhu? Is there anything wrong?
You actually summarized it very well, Prabhu. Actually, these were the sort of the takeaway points in terms of the philosophy. Obviously, we discussed more philosophy, but yes, very much so. And those were absolutely correct. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for the wonderful class.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. Okay, and then Narayan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare
I
Krishna.
have two questions, small questions. Do we have any choice of choosing the guna individual?
Okay, do we have a chance of choosing the gunas?
Choice of choosing the guna.
Yes, of course. Choosing the guna, we cannot obviously pick them out of a candy machine, but we can choose the candy that according to which we could choose the candy and then according to the guna that it's in. So in other words, we cannot choose the gunas, but we can choose the atmosphere that will inspire a certain guna. Right? The gunas are not floating in the sky. So it is the we can choose the association, and in that way choose the guna that we are in.
The soul comes with the imprint of different gunas. That what it means, Prabhuji?
No. So we have a certain guna that we're in, right? That we come with, like you're saying. The gunas, soul comes with certain gunas. But we can choose the gunas by choosing what we do, by choosing our association, and by choosing our environment.
Very nice. Thank you, Prabhuji. The other question is, which is the most important chapter in Bhagavad Gita?
Oh,
Out
that's
of it, all are important. Which is the most important?
that we cannot say. That only Krishna can answer. We'll have to ask Lord Krishna if we when we meet him. Yes.
I need to find a channel to Lord Krishna directly to find the answers to this.
Yes, yes. And Krishna might say that they're all equally important. So
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Dhananjay Krishna Prabhu. Dhananjay Krishna Prabhu. Okay. Pushpanjali Mataji, you're next now.
Prabhuji, I wanted to clarify the understanding of the verse 14.26, unfailing in all circumstances. So, like, for example, Corona is there. It's not like, we do the same thing that we were doing pre-Corona. So how I understand is that you should not stop devotional service. Maybe the format will change, maybe what we do changes. And like, for example, somebody is going through a lot of problems, they'll still worship Krishna. They'll still appreciate and be thankful to Krishna. I think that is the understanding of, continuing to do devotional service rather than like, okay, now I'm not able to do this because of my health, but in my heart, I'm still grateful to Krishna. He's still my Lord. Is that the right understanding, Prabhuji?
So very interesting point. I was just hearing a class this morning, like I was mentioning in the same class, Gaurang Prabhu was saying that there's the two assets that a devotee has, two very key parts of a devotee. One is the devotee's service to the Lord, and the second is the devotee's vows. So vows are also an important part of our spiritual life. And this unfailing in all circumstances can also mean in terms of our vows. A devotee gains strength by keeping their vows, and a devotee loses strength by breaking their vows. So like your example, the that coronavirus is here, so our service has modified, but our vows should not change. So the vows of, following the four regulated principles, chanting 16 rounds, that is unfailing in all circumstances. And those vows are our bhakti also. That's our devotional service. Like chanting 16 rounds, it may be a vow that we've taken, and it is also our devotional service. So certain things can change, but the devotional service to which we've taken a vow for, those should not change.
Yes, Prabhuji, very clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. And then Vrinda Mataji, I think this is the first time you're asking a question.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Wonderful class as always. Nice question answers. Prabhuji, I was thinking that there are death results for each mode, for like mode of passion and mode of ignorance. So the death result is like animal kingdom for the mode of ignorance. So I was thinking, what about those who have performed some adnyata sikriti, and although they are in the mode of ignorance, does the result is still the same? I mean, is the result still same, or it gets elevated? Because we have the sankirtan and all, and we go out of temple and we make people sing and dance, and it's like there must be people who are in the mode of ignorance and passion, but so the death result is still the same for them, or does it help them to get elevated? How does it work?
That's a very good question. See, bhakti, devotional service, is beyond. It is beyond the gunas, and it's also beyond varnashram. Varnashram, Prabhupada encouraged us so that we can develop our bhakti. So varnashram can be used in the service of bhakti, But bhakti is beyond varnashram. Pure bhakti. So agyata sukriti, this is in a completely different realm. This is in the realm of bhakti and the mercy of a devotee. And that is beyond the gunas. That goes straight to the heart. And when that goes straight to the heart, then that can lead us closer to Krishna. See, so that's more on the transcendental level, transcending the modes of nature. The Gyata Sukriti helps us come closer to Krishna. It may not affect our gunas, we still have the same gunas, but it will put us on the path of bhakti, due to which we will ultimately give up or transcend the gunas, you see. So Agyata Sukriti puts us on the path of bhakti. Our gunas may stay the same, but that is in the transcendental realm of bhakti.
Okay.
Yes. That's like someone who serves a Vaishnava, came and helped Srila Prabhupada. Their gunas are the same pretty much before and after. But because of that service, they will come in touch with another devotee and they'll start on the path of bhakti. And once they start on the path of bhakti, then due to the process of bhakti, they will transcend the gunas. So in that moment, that Agyata Sukriti doesn't free them from the gunas. But what the Agyata Sukriti does, it puts them in touch with a devotee who then teaches them devotional service, which then frees them from the gunas.
Okay. So it actually takes them to bhakti, close to Krishna, and then bhakti transcends all the modes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice question. Very nice question. Champakalata Saki Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for a wonderful session of question answers. Prabhu, I had a question. Text number 20, Krishna is saying that when you know all these gunas, you can be happy even in this lifetime. So would you explain a little bit, elaborate on that, like just by knowing them? Like I know you gave the example of London Harinam and everything, but in our case, practically, is it completely related with just dovetailing our services, or how can we really be happy just by knowing the gunas?
Yeah. Because when we truly know,
Prabhu, one second. So another thing, Prabhu, like on daily basis, we don't focus on our gunas, right? Like on, even if we some days we oversleep, we don't focus, because today I was in mode of ignorance. So practically, I'm trying to understand how is that possible?
Yes, because we should. You see, we should focus on the gunas. In our Krishna consciousness, sometimes we don't enough. Why? Because when we recognize the gunas, if we truly know the gunas, then we will know that we are not the gunas. And when we know that we are not the gunas, then they won't affect us so much. And this is why Krishna is saying that when you know the gunas, you can experience nectar even in this life. Because ultimately everything is the transformation of the gunas. So if we understand the gunas, then we'll understand I'm not these feelings that I get. I'm not this mind. I'm beyond it. So therefore, like the case of the Avanti Brahmana, right? The Avanti Brahmana finally recognizes that the cause of his happiness and distress was not due to the people who were, disturbing him, but the cause of his happiness and distress was his own mind. And when he kept his mind in service to Krishna, absorbed in Krishna, he was always happy. Because he recognized, I'm not the gunas. You see, I'm not these interactions of the three modes that I have or that other people have. So it is a mindset. It's actually a practice. And this is not just theory that we're reading here, okay, the theoretical knowledge of how Prakriti works. This is something practical that Krishna is teaching us, that we have to think in terms of the gunas. So someone comes and they're disturbing us. We have to think, okay, which guna is that person in? They're in the mode of ignorance, mode of passion. Okay, so now I can help them. This is why Prabhupada would always say, chant Hare Krishna, everything will be okay. Read Srimad Bhagavatam, I'll be okay. Okay, if I help them in their spiritual life, they will advance. Now, these things don't change overnight. So people don't change overnight. So we say, okay, let me have him read Bhagavatam. So after two hours, he'll move to the mode of goodness. No, it won't happen like that. but at least we can identify it and not feel attacked by it, not feel disillusioned by it. Okay, it's a mode of ignorance. This person has a high density of mode of ignorance. So with this knowledge, therefore, we can experience nectar in this life, because um, because that's uh, you can say the bewildering nature of this material world is 50% of our battle. That's our biggest problem, is we don't understand why things are happening. Why at work do people behave the way they do when I go to the office? And the gunas explain us this is why it's happening and this is what the solution is.
Thank you, Prabhu, so much. And Prabhu, I had one more question with this.
We'll come back to that. Mataji will come back to that. Just
sure, Prabhu, yes.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Dhananjay Krishna Prabhu, are you back by any chance? Okay, no.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandvat Pranam. This is Jai Draupadi Devi Dasi.
Krishna Mataji.
Thank you so much for the wonderful, wonderful explanation. It's really amazing. Prabhuji, I have a question regarding that, like teenagers, and they are in the mode of passion.
Who?
They want teenagers, like sometime. So I have a question regarding that. How can we make them understand, like according to our scriptures, this is wrong. We should not think that someone is doing this and we have to do this. Same thing, we have to do this. So how can we make them understand?
Yeah, so this is what we're discussing, right? So this is actually a great example that age is dominated by the mode of passion. So we can recognize, okay, this is their age of mode of passion. They're in the mode of passion. And so what can I do to engage their passion in Krishna service? Right? So speaking on that point of using the mode which may be binding us, making it an asset by using it in Krishna service. Like young people, I've noticed they're very, very, they think they can conquer the world. They're very eager to please. They want, they're looking for acceptance, for what's the word that I'm looking for? They're looking for acknowledgement, like recognition. They want to be recognized as someone. They want to prove themselves. They're at that age. They want to prove themselves, and they're very high energy. They can literally do anything. I mean, at that age, I could stay up all night for 3 nights continuously and be fine. Literally. I mean, beach, in the middle, we had to take a nap or something, but you have so much energy and you're so active. And Prabhupada recognized that. And therefore, he used young people to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. He used that youthful energy, that intense passion and ambition and desire for acceptance, recognition, and vindication, to the desire to be vindicated. They wanted to please Prabhupada, and he let them please him. And he used their energy to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. And that group that was with Prabhupada, those young, they were hippies at that time, they actually spread it by Prabhupada's mercy to every nook and corner. So it's a very powerful age. It's a very wonderful age that if utilized in Krishna service, those youngsters can do a lot for Krishna. On the other hand, if it's wasted, then they can damage a lot. They can, Prabhupada actually says that a good old age depends on how you use your youth. If you waste your youth, your old age won't go so well. If you spend your youth, if you like material life, this is what it is. It's like they on drugs, alcohol, and sex, right? These are the things that youth is all this power, all this energy, and it just gets drained in drugs, alcohol, and sex, and just wasting time, useless video games, right? Video games. All that intelligence is there. but just wasted in something that has no purpose, no meaning. So that same energy, if it's channeled in the service of the Lord, passion, can be do wonderful things, very, very nice things. So yeah, that's a very good example actually that illustrates what we're talking about.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I want to know, like, Mataji raised you, raised you and Radhika Raman Prabhuji. Such a, I want to know, like, how Mataji raised at that time.
So then my mother's seminar will be very nice. That's my kind of, you can attend her seminar, and that will, she has the whole parenting seminar that's, she does in many places. It's also available online. You can also contact her. She has regular classes that she gives on this, how to raise Krishna conscious children, how to raise children in Krishna consciousness. But just as a kind of a correction to your comment, um, she raised us very nicely, but I wasn't such a good youngster when I was young. I was still very insincere. So I'm still trying in Krishna consciousness, just trying to make some progress. And this Bhakti Shastri course is actually helping a lot. I remember when I finished my first Bhakti Shastri course, at that time I was like 16 when I finished it. And so I went and I told my Guru Maharaj that I completed the Bhakti Shastri course. I was feeling very proud of it. Again, the teenager, like wanting to be recognized and accepted. So I went to him and I told him, I finished my Bhakti Shastri course. I've completed it with honors. And then he asked me, so was this your first time or your second time or your third time doing it? I was just shocked by his response. I completed the course. So is this your first time or your second time or third? So you only done it once. I said, yeah, I completed the course. I said, no, you should do it at least 4 or 5 times, at least 4 or 5 times. In one time, you don't learn anything. You have to do the course 4 or 5 times. So this is the thing. This is exactly the point that we spiritual life and spiritual knowledge is so deep, and we're just scratching the surface. And the first time is just getting us interested into the topic. Many of you are taking this, and some of you are almost done with it. Some of you are starting with it. But this is just the start of gaining. I mean, when we do Bhakti Shastri, we're doing a summary study. Then our whole life is there to study these books more deeply. And that's even a lifetime is not enough to study these books and to imbibe the deep knowledge that's present in these books.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Very nice. Yes. Ambika Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So my mind is like, so crazy. It's getting diverted. But just so curious, just an off-topic question. How old you were when you got initiation?
Oh, I think I was, it was the same year as Bhakti Shastri, actually. The amazing thing was, it was the amazing thing, and this is actually the result. This is actually the result of Bhakti Shastri. This is why it's such a nice course. That by reading Prabhupada's books, we get the inspiration to take the shelter of the Guru. So after I completed my Bhakti Shastri, I distinctly remember the last 1 or 2 weeks, I got a really strong urge that I want a spiritual master. And so it was that year, or was the next year? I think it was the next year that I got initiation. I'm sorry, I am so bad with dates. I should know it on the, I should remember it. But I did 1999, I completed Bhakti Shastri. So I think it was like year 2000 or something like this. Yes.
Okay, so wonderful, Prabhuji, because a lot of us have teenagers, and actually my daughter has also expressed her interest, like according to her thought, this is the year I want to get initiated, this and that. So it's really, it's kind of very helpful to sort of, guide them. Because these the children are born in Krishna consciousness, and obviously us we are not as sincere as your parents were. So It's so good to get some understanding, and this way we can guide our kids also. So my question is, Prabhuji, I mean, again, this is not against anybody, any one individual, but in general, when we are talking about like practical dealings with devotees, and especially like preaching, because you have mentioned this couple of times that uh, like, well, all of you who are taking Bhakti Shastra eventually is going to start preaching, so that is, I mean, it's not the intention we started with, but okay, obviously this is the knowledge that we have gained, and I mean, now we should share with others, uh, uh, the knowledge. So, and so when you somehow become not become, but like you lead other people, you are a leader, and you are like a senior to the people who we are sharing with or teaching with. Sometimes, and it is very, very difficult, I think, because we, most of us actually, we are all grihasthas, the community that we are around also all mostly grihasthas. We are guided by grihasthas. Nobody is sannyasi or brahmachari who is 24/7 doing Krishna consciousness, or like such a high elevated level. We are all sort of in a mixed bag, and depending, we have limited time, we have our daily sadhana, so it is very difficult. And sometimes it happens, and especially if you are a leader, like maybe for example in your community, you start with a smaller group of people, number of people, and obviously you want to preach to more people, more people, more people. You have that passion, it's sort of a passion also. So you have the passion that you want to preach to more people, increase the group. But sometimes what happens, that when you have more people, if the system is not set up in a way where you have trained more people that can guide more people, connect, it's impossible for you personally to sort of interact with everybody and be there for them. And sometimes in this process, these newcomers, or the people who think that you are a leader, feel like you were not reciprocated enough. So, and I have felt that couple of times also, and I know that I should not feel that way. So maybe that's one of my question, that how should I always be in a mood that I should not feel that I did not get reciprocated by my leader or my senior. And at the same time, what should I do when I start becoming like preaching to other people? I should not do this, specifically stay away from this, because I know that I should not behave in this way.
Mm. Okay, nice question. Um, there was one thing that was very interesting, that Hanumat Preshak Maharaj was once saying, that how um, there's some statement in the scriptures that leadership is such a thing, or being a leader is such a thing, that no matter how the best leader will make decisions, um, will make the right decisions only 80% out of the time. So basically, one out of every five decisions that a leader makes will be incorrect. Even if you are Maharaj Yudhishthira, even if you are Lord, if you're, unless you're God, if you're Maharaj Yudhishthira, one out of five decisions that you make will be incorrect. So even Maharaj Yudhishthira showed this himself in the game of dice. So this is all about compassion, actually, that how the leaders, they have to be compassionate towards those who they are leading. But then those who are being led by the leaders, they need to be compassionate towards their leaders, because they need to understand they have a very difficult role. They have a thankless task, somewhat of an impossible task. So we should practice as devotees to see each other with compassion also. That we see each other with compassion, that okay, this leader, like your question was, this leader did not reciprocate with me because they're not God. They didn't know that I was wanting reciprocation, or maybe even they have some ulterior motive, but they're imperfect. It's okay. I have to be compassionate. So it's not that we're hiding the truth. It's not that we're avoiding the truth, or we're saying that imperfections don't exist in our leaders, because that also doesn't work. We see it. We see the problems. We see the imperfections. But rather, our response is one of compassion. That okay, yes, it is true. It is a real thing. It's a problem there, but I can be compassionate. If I'm more advanced, I can be compassionate. okay, this person is a bit scatterbrained, or they don't give me enough time, or they're limited in what they do, but it's okay. They're also imperfect beings, like that. So that's one point. And then the second point is that one of the good fortunes that I had growing up is that we were in a place where there were very few devotees, and very few devotees used to come. Like, it was very isolated, is Boise, Idaho. So it's a negative point, you would say, but it's also a good point, because we didn't have that association, we really understood the value of it. We really craved for it. And so then when we had this association, we really, really appreciated it. So like you're saying, in terms of big community, and that's why it reminded me, in big communities, this is a problem, that there's so many devotees that they don't realize that there's places in this world, like Evansville, Indiana, like Boise, Idaho, like different places where there aren't devotees. And being in a big community is actually such an honor. It's you must have done such pious activities in your past life to be in a place where there's so many devotees, because not everyone gets that chance. And when there aren't a big devotee, like you see this a lot in Alachua, like there are in this devotee, big community, and they just always had it. They don't value other devotees. They don't realize the good fortune of having that association. So sometimes Krishna can put us in a situation where we're starved of devotee association, just so we can understand the value of it when we do have it.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I think, probably, my mind is probably analyzing. I'm like probably becoming that disciple of Sachinandan Maharaj, who is trying to be intellectual. But I think, it's better, maybe it might, at least, for myself, it might be better if I lack that association, and, maybe if I would want to move to actually Indiana probably, and be with less devotees, and perfect myself, hopefully. So, when I see the devotees, I value them, I guess.
So, well, the fact that you're asking these questions shows that you're valuing them, because you want to have a good relationship. You see, like, I see sometimes devotees, we have some in our, in our own, in our own communities here, that they just don't care for the devotees association. They won't show up. They're just like, they're non-existent, and they, just want to do their own thing. And that's very dangerous, because you're not realizing the value. Sometimes conflict is a form of affection, right? When we respect someone, we are actually disagreeing with them. So conflict can also be something that can be led into something good can come out of it, because we actually care about each other. That's why we disagree, right? So the fact that you're asking this and you're thinking about this means that you value it. But yes, conflict or no conflict, we should never give up the association of devotees. It's a great misfortune to be in a place where there's no devotees. There's no greater misfortune in this world. Ramananda Rai says this. So we should never feel that, oh, let me go to a place like Evansville. Because, I mean, what are we without devotees? Better to fight with them and stay with them than not to. At the same time, we should not offend them. Prabhupada, one place says that, obviously this is just side, we're just having side conversation here. But Prabhupada says that if we cannot get along with our leader, then we should go to a place where there's no temple, and we should build a temple. We should start a new program. And he says that's perfectly fine. He said everyone cannot get along with everyone, so therefore go and start a new program, and then you'll find people there who can get along with you. So then that is engaging our independence, or our, you could say, our own mindset in Krishna service. And he says, but in either case, we should never leave Krishna consciousness. Either we work with devotees, or we create more devotees. We preach and produce more devotees.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Param Karuna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, okay. I just wanted to add to that point. One of the Matajis brought up about how were you all brought up, and you mentioned about Mataji and the seminar. I just wanted to say that a huge part of our life is indebted to Mataji and your family, because we were we had two small kids long back. I mean, we still have them, but they were very small long back in like kindergarten and first grade. And that time we were looking for good school and all, and we bought a big house, not a big house, but an expensive house in a good school district. That's what made it expensive. So we bought this expensive house and all that to be in a good school district. And then 6 months later, we attended the seminar. Mataji and Radhikaraman Prabhuji came. We had the wonderful fortune of serving them at our house, and they led a 2-day seminar. And after that seminar, me and my wife made this firm decision to homeschool our children, both boys. And the thing that was then at that time eating me up is that, oh my God, we just spent so much money buying this expensive house to be in a good school district, and now we won't use it. And that, anyway, that phase was over very soon, but it has been 10 years now, and our kids are in high school. One of them is will be finishing his high school now, and it has been the most enjoyable and pleasant, happy journey. And given a second chance, we would absolutely repeat it completely. And we just want to thank your family for inspiring us. And so many families in our congregation then took up homeschooling as well. So I saw that WhatsApp post about your life, where how Prabhuji kind of got a book, and then, you know, when Mataji read it when she was pregnant, and that whole episode, it was just so, I'm very poor at WhatsApp to kind of share back, but I just wanted to take, since this topic came up, I just wanted to share how indebted we are to introduce this concept of Krishna conscious homeschooling. And then second point I wanted to just quickly mention to that Mataji who was asking is that one of the great things that Mataji has done, has written this book, wonderful book called Homeschooling Krishna's Children. So this has all the teachings that are there in the 2-day seminar. And this, I have distributed this book to many, many, many people, that it's not just even for those, it's not for those who want to homeschool. Even who don't want to homeschool, 80% of this book is still applicable to them, because there are such wonderful teachings and how to bring up children and all that. We, of course, learned, this book was published much later after we attended the seminar. But later on, I found that, this is just such a valuable resource to just bring up children, whether in homeschooling or non-homeschooling environment. Yes, it really doesn't, this book's applicability is very, very much there. So I would strongly request all parents of young children to read this book and get all the wonderful, how to bring up Krishna conscious children will be very nicely available in this book. And you were mentioning about a seminar recording. So that is my final question to you. I have a recording which I distribute to people, but that was a very poor quality recording done in ISV, Silicon Valley Temple. That's the one that I have, where Mataji and Prabhuji are kind of, and this was probably done long back with, like, kind of so-called ancient equipment and audio and all that. And the slides were also not visible, that were being projected nicely or something. But if there's a more modern kind of, seminar style, like, more YouTuber style kind of seminar thing, please, I would love to have that link. So I distribute these things regularly, because so many people, because of our own homeschooling journey with our kids, so many people ask us, how did you homeschool? How did you homeschool? We said, we just give the pointer here. Okay, this is our source. Instead of me telling you all the details, why don't you just go to the source that we went to, and you will get everything. So such a recording, which is of a good quality and has all the points, I will find it like a jewel that I can distribute to many people. So if you can send that, the best possible recording of your homeschooling seminar with slides or whatever on, I would very much appreciate, because so many people, you have no idea how many people come and contact us, how to homeschool, and especially how to homeschool in Krishna conscious environment.
Well, Prabhu, you yourself are like a, like a touchstone, and so therefore you are, you're being very compassionate to us now. Your kind words are so inspiring and so encouraging And actually, my mother's on the call. She's there, so she can speak to this more. Ma, are you there? Can you unmute yourself? I hope she's listening. Sometimes she's on the call, but she's not there. Okay, let me just. Are you there? Okay. Ma, are you there? No. Okay, so as she's not there, we have the recording for this, so I'll have her listen to it, and she may have a recording. She may have a better recording. Oh, someone came. So she will because these days with Zoom, what happened is that normally, like you're saying, we were not doing so many recordings of the seminar, but recently she gave like 5 or 6 seminars via Zoom, and the whole seminar is just via Zoom, and I'm sure that those were recorded. So I'll ask her. The other thing is that if there isn't a good recording, we could maybe we could just arrange one, so we could do it somewhere and then record it so that it's there. But I will definitely ask her. And what you're saying is in terms of the book is very nice. I agree, it's a very good introduction to the whole process. So sometimes people also don't have time to read the whole recording, but if they go through that book, Homeschooling Krishna's Children, it gives a very nice introduction. We would love to meet your kids sometimes, because they are one of the success stories of this homeschooling process. So they're, I'm sure, very very brilliant souls, and it would be an honor to meet them sometime. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Brandy Mataji, your question, and then I think the others are just hands up from before. So we'll make that the last question.
Okay, Hare Krishna. So I've wondered this a lot, and then I was inspired to ask it in one of your conversations. You mentioned that we should have the frame of mind to look at something or somebody and see the modes in which they're operating under. How do we do that delicately with people or even places and situations in general without ourselves then come from the mode of ignorance? Because we also shouldn't judge a devotee or a situation externally, right? Like we shouldn't assume that we know what their internal consciousness or intentions are. So how do we, because we could be wrong, but also it is important to, I see how it's really important to have the sense of mind to look at a situation and see how beneficial it's going to be for your spiritual life. But I feel like it could also kind of trip you up and maybe even be like a trap for like.
Okay, I think you froze there, Brandy. So yes, we we use our best judgment. Prabhupada says that in every situation we use our best judgment. So that's where our own reason, our own common sense, our own responsibility comes in play. That, okay, this is the scriptures, this is the teachings, but this is how I apply it. This is how I need to apply that knowledge. So Prabhupada, we were actually talking about this recently, that Prabhupada had a balance of reason and faith, like faith and reason. He also applied his good judgment in every situation. So that's, we get the knowledge from Krishna, and then we apply. Krishna's also given knowledge within our own heart in the form of our intelligence, our common sense, our own inspiration. So we apply that to the situation. Okay, this is the knowledge, and this is how I apply it to the situation. And a devotee's, therefore, his devotee is very amazing. A devotee's mind is very difficult to understand, because Prabhupada had this quality. In one situation, he could be as very strong, very powerful, very assertive, and in another situation, extremely humble. And he would employ a situation in a certain situation to gain the result that he wanted. So if he wanted to, turn someone around, let's say, in this situation, by being super humble with that person, he could pull that person in. In another situation, by being strong, preaching strongly, he could do that. So oftentimes the result determines the means. So you use the means that will bring the desired result, which is generally the result of bringing people closer to Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. So we'll stop at this point. Thank you everyone for your wonderful comments, questions, and to be continued next week.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Pranam,
Thank you
Prabhuji.
for your
Hare
time.
Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dhamma Pranam.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna,
Thank you.
Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.